This is a compilation of over 3 hours of Assassin's Creed Protagonist lore explained, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with what happened to every protagonist after the story. From ancient Sparta to modern-day struggles, Assassin's Creed heroes have shaped history in unforgettable ways. But what became of them once their stories ended? Join us as we journey through time to uncover the fates, legacies, and hidden chapters of these iconic assassins and find out how their lives continued long after the last memory faded. Let's start with a warrior whose story spans millennia like no other. Cassandra of Sparta. Cassandra is not just a mercenary from ancient Greece. She's the only canonical protagonist of Assassin's Creed Odyssey and the keeper of the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, giving her near immortality. Sounds like the plot of a mythology epic, but it's real canon. For over 2,400 years, Cassandra carries the staff, living through untold centuries mostly in secret, watching history unfold while remaining hidden. She's seen empires rise and fall firsthand, from Alexander the Great's conquests to the distant modern age, which is as lonely and exhausting as it sounds. Before you think the game's choice just lets players pick a character, official Ubisoft sources clarify that Cassandra's journey is the true timeline, not Alexios's. This is backed by expanded media like the Odyssey novel and modern Animus storylines, where Cassandra's memories guide Layla Hassan in 2018. That year, Cassandra finally passes the staff to Layla, choosing to end her immortal watch and accept immortal death for the first time in millennia. Here's the thing. Cassandra's fate is unique among Assassin's Creed heroes, because her story literally bridges ancient Greece and the present. Her prolonged existence isn't just background flavor, it drives the modern-day narrative's core. This raises questions about what it means to carry such power for so long, the weight of endless time on one person's psyche, and the bittersweet decision to let go of godlike strength for a finite human life. While most protagonists fade into history, Cassandra's legacy endures as a linchpin connecting past and present. She is the living thread that ties Assassin's Creed's ancient mysteries straight through to now. But if you think an immortal Greek mercenary's fate is wild, wait until we dive into the story of Bayek of Siwa. Bayek of Siwa. Bayek isn't just your typical ancient hero. He's the guy who helped lay the foundation for the Assassin Brotherhood itself, back in Ptolemaic Egypt. Alongside his wife Aya, Bayek co-founded the Hidden Ones, a secretive group committed to fighting tyranny and protecting free will long before the Brotherhood became what we know today. His story in Assassin's Creed Origins is all about revenge, justice, and the birth of a movement that would echo through history. But here's where it gets weird. After Origins and the expansions wrap up, Bayek's later years go largely unrecorded. We know his tomb and mummified remains are eventually found near Siwa centuries later, so he clearly received a burial, but no game or novel ever shows us how he died or what his final years looked like. It's like he deliberately chose to fade into the shadows. Considering he founded a legendary order, you'd expect the guy's name etched in every Assassin's Hall of Fame, but instead, Bayek opts for a low-profile legacy. The big takeaway? Bayek cares more about the cause than personal glory. He hands off the dangerous Apple of Eden, not to a fellow assassin, but to a thief named Sutek, with explicit instructions to hide it forever. This shows just how cautious he was about Isu artifacts and their potential for disaster. The community has been buzzing for years, speculating about how Bayek died. Assassinated? Retired quietly? Nobody knows, and that's exactly the point. Ubisoft left his fate intentionally mysterious, reinforcing the idea that sometimes founding a movement means acting without fanfare and then disappearing. The evidence for his role as co-founder is rock solid, but his later life is deliberately thin on details, adding this narrative layer of mystery that's as fascinating as any epic battle. But if you think Bayek's quiet exit is odd, wait until you hear about Altair's dramatic life and death next. Altair ibn Lahad. Altair's story didn't end with the original Assassin's Creed credits. It was just the start of his transformation from a cocky assassin into the wise mentor of the Levantine Brotherhood, a role he held for over 6 decades, from 1191 until his death in 1257. During that time, Altair didn't just hunt Templars, he expanded the assassin's reach across continents and reshaped the Brotherhood into a powerful force no one expected. Here's where it gets really interesting. Altair built a secret vault beneath Masyaf Castle, which became the legendary Masyaf Library. This wasn't just a hidden stash, it was a fortress of assassin knowledge, packed with manuscripts, artifacts, and the ominous Apple of Eden, all locked away from prying eyes. Altair spent his final days there, dying of natural causes in solitude, seated with the apple by his side. That quiet death inside the secret chamber is one of Assassin's Creed's most iconic moments, cementing his legacy as a guardian of assassin history and a man who accepted the weight of his actions. But Altair's path wasn't smooth. His leadership was rocked by betrayal from Abbas Sofyan, a high-ranking assassin who tried to overthrow him. This cut deep and almost tore the order apart. Although Altair's sons, Daram and Sef, had roles in the Brotherhood's story, Abbas was the real threat. Still, Altair reclaimed control and refocused the Brotherhood, teaching hard lessons about loyalty and sacrifice. The real magic? Altair's legacy stretched centuries into the future, passed down through memories found by Ezio Auditore. These memories and the vault's keys let Ezio unlock Altair's wisdom and keep the fight alive, linking the two masters across time. It's a perfect example of the series' theme, how ideas outlive their creators and shape generations. Altair didn't just disappear, he became the solemn sage, keeper of secrets, and architect of assassin survival. Next, we jump centuries ahead to the Renaissance and meet Ezio Auditore da Firenze, the man who discovered Altair's vault and practically rewrote assassin history. Ezio Auditore da Firenze is easily the most iconic assassin in the entire franchise. But here's the twist. After decades of bloody vendettas, political intrigue, and brutal battles, his story ends not with a grand war or violent death, but with peace, family, and quiet reflection. Before you write that off as boring, hear me out. Ezio's journey, from reckless youth in 1459 Florence to wise mentor of the Italian Brotherhood, is one of transformation. He reclaims his family's honor, dismantles Templar influence across Renaissance Italy, and even unites the scattered pages of Altair's ancient codex, bridging centuries of assassin lore. Then after years of fighting, around 1513, Ezio walks away from the shadows. Unlike many heroes who die in battle or disappear mysteriously, his retirement is well documented. He settles into a calm Tuscan villa with Sofia Sartor, his beloved wife, and raises two children, Flavia and Marcello. This domestic chapter offers a rare glimpse of normalcy in a chaotic world. The 2012 animated short Assassin's Creed Embers shows his final moments, a rare peaceful ending for an assassin protagonist. At age 65, in 1524, Ezio quietly enjoys a day in Florence with Sofia and his daughter. Suddenly, he suffers a fatal heart event, dying peacefully on a cafe bench, surrounded not by enemies, but by everyday life. He leaves Sofia a letter full of reflections on liberty, love, and the preciousness of time, truths he only fully grasped later in life. Here's where it gets poetic. Ezio's death avoids spectacle or drama. It's both simple and profound. His quiet passing symbolizes his complete evolution, from vengeance-driven youth to a man who embraced the Brotherhood's philosophy beyond the blade. Plus, his role in uniting Altair's codex means his influence echoes beyond death, making him the Brotherhood's philosophical heart and a key ancestor whose memories reach future generations, including Desmond Miles. Ezio's story is one of the rare assassin arcs wrapped with dignity. His legacy lives not only in the Brotherhood's fight, but in the peaceful life he built. That contrast, violent beginnings leading to serene ends, is what makes his fate so memorable. But if you think Ezio's long, peaceful retirement is the ultimate endgame, wait until you hear what happened to pirate-turned-assassin Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway's story is one of transformation and tragic irony wrapped in the rough seas of the early 1700s Caribbean. He starts off as a privateer, a kind of government-sanctioned pirate, but quickly slides deeper into the life of piracy, chasing gold and glory with little care for causes or creeds. However, as his journey progresses, Edward reluctantly embraces the assassin path, learning that there's more at stake than treasure and personal freedom. By the end of Assassin's Creed IV, Black Flag, he's not just a pirate with a hidden blade, he becomes a key figure in the Assassin Brotherhood. After years of Caribbean swashbuckling, Edward settles down in London, a far cry from his chaotic life at sea. There he obtains a pardon from the government, marries Tessa Stevenson Oakley, and fathers a son, Haytham Kenway. Edward tries to leave his rogue days behind and pass on assassin ideals to Haytham, training him in the arts of the Creed. But here's where it gets dark. In 1735, Edward's life violently ends when mercenaries, hired by the Templar Grand Master Reginald Birch, attack his family estate, searching for Edward's personal journal filled with assassin secrets. Edward is killed during the raid, leaving his family shattered. This brutal event is dramatized in the novel Assassin's Creed, Forsaken, which reveals the depth of Edward's failure to protect his kin. Haytham witnesses his father's murder and narrowly escapes with his sister, who survives the assault but is later abducted. This trauma catapults Haytham away from the assassin teachings and directly into Templar hands, where he becomes one of their most formidable champions. The cruel irony is undeniable. Edward's hopes of securing a loyal assassin legacy through his son are shattered, and instead he inadvertently fathers a powerful Templar enemy. Edward Kenway's legacy is complicated. He serves as a link between the chaotic pirate era and the more organized British Brotherhood, embodying both the freedom and recklessness that distinguished early assassins. Communities still debate whether his dual identity, as both pirate and assassin, means he ever truly succeeded in the creed, and whether his assassin training was ultimately a failed gamble. But the canon evidence is rock solid, drawn from the game, expanded novels, and lore entries that detail his rise, his London life, and the tragic violence that closed his chapter. If you thought Edward's story was tangled, wait until you hear about the man who betrayed the Brotherhood from within, Shay Patrick Cormac. Shay Patrick Cormac. Shay. Patrick Cormac is easily one of Assassin's Creed's most divisive figures, the assassin who turned Templar and the man whose actions literally rocked the world. Before you write him off as just a traitor, hear me out. Shay's defection wasn't born from blind betrayal, but from witnessing the Brotherhood's reckless obsession with power after triggering the devastating 1755 Lisbon earthquake. That earthquake wasn't a natural disaster. It was sparked when Shay stole a dangerous Isu artifact from a hidden temple under the city. Thousands died or were displaced, all because the assassins were chasing power without care for consequences. Official lore confirms that after this catastrophe, Shay turned his back on the Brotherhood's cause and joined the Templar Order, convinced their philosophy was the only way to prevent such recklessness. Under mentor Haytham Kenway, he hunts down former assassin allies across Europe and America, dismantling their networks. Shay's pursuit of his ex-comrades culminates in the 1776 killing of Charles Dorian at Versailles, a brutal act that indirectly orphaned Arnaud Dorian, the future assassin protagonist, forever linking Shay's vendettas to wider series history. But Shay didn't just stop there. He remained staunchly loyal to the Templar cause for the rest of his life, continuing to search for Isu artifacts on their behalf. Details about his final years are murky, and exactly how and where he died remains one of Assassin's Creed's more unfinished chapters. What we do know is that he never renounced his Templar ideals or returned to the Brotherhood. Community debate around Shay is heated. Some see him as a principled whistleblower, exposing assassin fanaticism gone too far. Others view him as the ultimate traitor who murdered old allies and tore the Brotherhood from within. Did he ever regret turning his back on the creed? Canonical texts remain silent on this, fueling endless fan theories and moral grappling. What is crystal clear is the massive long shadow Shay cast across both assassin and Templar history, reshaping allegiances and spreading consequences from Lisbon to revolutionary France and beyond. But if you thought Shay's betrayal was complicated, wait until you hear what comes next about a certain indigenous assassin with an equally tangled family legacy. Raton Nyake Ton. Connor is a fascinating figure who lives largely in the shadows after the American Revolution, despite being one of the series' most pivotal heroes. Born as Raton Nyake Ton to Haytham Kenway and a Native American mother, he was raised among the Kanyankahaka and became a symbol bridging assassin and Templar bloodlines. But here's the thing. Beyond the revolution, what happens to him is mostly mystery wrapped in silence. Before you roll your eyes thinking Ubisoft just forgot about him, hear me out. The game shows Connor fighting for his people's land and justice during and after the war, but official sources deliberately keep his later life vague. Canon simply says he continued assassin work in the shadows, helping secure territory and protect his tribe, but there's no detailed story or documented death. It's like the franchise quietly let him slip off the stage. Here's where it gets a bit melancholy. Fans have pieced together scattered clues and gravitated toward the theory that Connor died alone, forgotten by history, the ultimate tragic assassin fading into obscurity. This theory isn't confirmed by any official novels or games, but it's powerful. The idea of a heroic figure so central during such a bloody revolution quietly disappearing without grand fanfare or a noble end hits differently than a climactic death scene. It's the kind of ending that makes you think about how many real historical heroes get lost to time. The lack of formal narrative closure also fuels frustration. Compared to Ezio's richly detailed family life and peaceful death, or Edward Kenway's tragic murder, Connor's story feels underdeveloped, deservedly significant but underexplored. His place in the modern day as Desmond's ancestor gives him lasting importance, but the man himself remains an enigma. Players are left to fill in the blanks, debating whether he found peace or if the fight never really ended. Ultimately, Ratenhnake Tun embodies a rare kind of assassin, one who wins battles but quietly vanishes from history's spotlight. His legacy lives on in blood and memory, but his fate reminds us that not every hero gets a heroic goodbye. But if you think fading away is sad, wait until you hear what happened to Arnaud Dorian. Arnaud Dorian's story is a wild ride through the chaos of the French Revolution, only with hidden blades, secret societies, and a lot of personal drama. Orphaned young, he's adopted by the charming but corrupt François de la Serre, which drags him into the deadly feud between assassins and Templars in revolutionary France. Early on, his assassin mentor pushes him toward redemption after tragedy, but there's no neat hero cleans his slate moment when he first wields the hidden blade. It's the classic troubled origin, but darker and more tangled. Before you dismiss Arnaud as just another brooding assassin, hear me out. His journey is messy. After dismantling Germain's inner circle and killing Germain himself, Arnaud wrestles with grief and guilt. Canonically, his obsession with vengeance gets him formally expelled from the Brotherhood at one point, and Elise pulls away from him too. Their complicated relationship fuels much of his emotional turmoil. His response is bitter despair and recklessness, not a spiral into alcoholism, but an emotional, not just official, fall from grace. Here's where it gets brutal. Elise dies in the final fight with Germain inside the temple. Not the Bastille temple, just the temple. Her death hits Arnaud hard, fueling his quest for justice rather than crushing him. He's eventually welcomed back into the Brotherhood and rises to the rank of Master Assassin, scarred but unbroken. Arnaud's legacy lives on in the Assassin's Creed universe. His genetic memories are still hunted by Abstergo and the Initiates, keeping his story alive in the modern-day fight. But here's the kicker. Some fans think Arnaud's emotional struggles, especially around Elise's death, deserved more screen time. Others argue his growth feels rushed, and his fate after the revolution left vague on purpose, sparking endless fan theories. So, Arnaud's saga is all heartbreak and grit, messy, flawed, but unforgettable in Brotherhood history. Next up, we'll dive into the life and legacy of the franchise's modern-day linchpin, Desmond Miles. Desmond Miles. Desmond Miles is the heart of the modern Assassin's Creed saga, the guy who dragged us into the Animus and made ancient history feel dangerously relevant. His whole role was reliving the memories of famous assassin ancestors, Altair, Ezio, Connor, to stop catastrophic disasters in the present, but his story doesn't just end after he saves the world, it turns into something far stranger. In 2012, Desmond sacrifices himself by activating an ancient Isu device inside the Grand Temple to deflect a solar flare that would have wiped out humanity. That moment marks the end of his physical life, a heroic death that saves the planet but leaves his body lifeless. So you'd think that's the end for Desmond, right? Turns out no. Evidence suggests his consciousness didn't vanish with his body. Instead, Desmond's mind somehow persists digitally as the reader, an entity inside a vast Isu simulation guiding Layla Hassan, the modern-day assassin who picks up the torch. This isn't just theory. Hidden audio files, narrative hints in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, an official storytelling point to Desmond becoming an immortal digital guardian. He's less a man now, and more a database of memories and knowledge, helping fight new threats from a shadowy digital realm called the Grey. What makes Desmond unique is he's the genetic link connecting every major assassin we've played. His DNA carries the legacies of all those ancestors, making him the ultimate bridge between past and future. Even after death, he keeps the fight going, not as flesh and blood, but as an incorporeal presence deeply woven into the ongoing story. Meanwhile, the Templars haven't given up. After his death, Abstergo continues mining his memories and genetic data to fuel their sinister Animus projects. So even beyond his sacrifice, Desmond remains a contested prize in this endless war. Community debates about Desmond's fate remain lively. Some fans hope for his physical resurrection someday, while others embrace his role as the ethereal reader, a heroic echo living on inside machines. Both have merit. Canon confirms his death, but only hints at his digital survival. Here's the thing, Desmond's ending is both an end and a beginning. His sacrifice closed a chapter but opened the door to a new kind of existence. He went from assassin bartender to planet-saving martyr to timeless digital sentinel, forever connecting every thread of the assassin legacy. Every single Assassin's Creed protagonist has an origin story, a moment that transforms them from a normal person into a killer with a cause. But the very first assassin in this franchise, he was already one, and he blew it so badly that the game starts with him losing everything. So today, I'm breaking down how every protagonist became an assassin, starting with the one who had to do it twice. Altair ibn la Ahad. Most protagonists earn their hidden blade through tragedy. Altair is the only one who earns it, loses it, and has to crawl back from nothing. Born inside the Brotherhood's fortress at Masyaf, raised to kill from birth. By 24, he was the youngest master assassin in the Order's history, which made him insufferable. July 1191, Solomon's Temple. Altair breaks all three tenets of the creed in a single mission, loses an Apple of Eden to Robert de Sablé, and gets his brothers killed. Al-Mualim strips him from master assassin to novice. One mission. His redemption? 9 assassination targets across the Holy Land. Each kill forces him to question something he previously accepted without thinking. He stops being a weapon and starts asking why he's pointing. Then comes the real twist. Al-Mualim, his mentor, turns out to be using the apple to control everyone. Altair kills his own teacher, takes leadership of the Brotherhood, and spends the next 66 years reforming it from dogmatic killers into a philosophically questioning organization. He didn't just become an assassin, he became one twice and rebuilt the whole thing from scratch. But if Altair's story is about earning back what he lost, the next one is about a kid who never asked for any of this. Ezio Auditore dei Firenze. Ezio Auditore had zero idea he was born into an assassin family. For 17 years, he was just a Florentine noble kid getting into street fights and chasing women. Then, in 1476, his father Giovanni and brothers Federico and Petruccio were publicly hanged after a family friend named Uberto Alberti sold them out to the Templars. Just like that, everything was gone. He fled to Monteriggioni with his mother and sister, and his uncle Mario sat him down and basically said, "Surprise, we're all assassins." Mario trained him in swordplay, free running, the hidden blade, the whole curriculum. But Ezio wasn't thinking about ideology or ancient orders. He was thinking about Uberto Alberti's throat. And here's the thing about his first kill. There's no ceremony, no creed recitation, no ritual. He finds Uberto in the courtyard of Santa Croce and stabs him. Multiple times. With the hidden blade, while Uberto tries to justify what he did. Ezio doesn't care. He's a 17-year-old with a blade and grief, and that's it. But that raw, ugly vendetta eventually becomes something bigger. He dismantles the entire Pazzi conspiracy, saves Lorenzo de' Medici during the 1478 assassination attempt, and hunts conspirators across Tuscany. By 1503, he's mentor of the Italian Brotherhood, serving until 1513. The impulsive teenager from Florence became a reflective philosopher by revelations, which is the purest revenge-to-mentor pipeline this franchise has ever produced. But if you think Ezio's path into the Brotherhood was painful, wait until you hear about a kid who watched his mother burn alive. Connor Kenway. Most assassins in this franchise lose something and then get handed a Brotherhood. Connor loses everything and has to build one from scratch. Born Radonhaneke Tan in 1756, he grows up in a Kanyenkehaka village. His mother is Kanyeti Darayo. His father is Hatham Kenway, Grand Master of the Colonial Templars, which is, not ideal. When colonial forces burn his village and his mother dies in the flames, Connor is left with nothing but a name he can't use and a people he can't protect alone. Here's where it gets lonely. After a vision from the Isu entity Juno, Connor seeks out Achilles Davenport, a retired mentor living in a rotting manor, presiding over a brotherhood that no longer exists. Achilles doesn't want a student. The man has given up entirely. But Connor doesn't leave. Eventually, Achilles gives him a Western name, a hidden blade, a tomahawk, and teaches him to fight a war nobody else will fight. Together, they rebuild the Colonial Brotherhood from literally 0 members. But here's the thing that makes Connor's story hit different. He spends the entire American Revolution fighting Templars, and the Grand Master he's trying to stop is his own father. Every kill brings him closer to a confrontation he doesn't want. His assassin identity isn't built on philosophy or revenge, it's built on survival. Nobody else was going to protect his people. So he did. If you think Connor had complicated family dynamics, wait until you meet his grandfather, who became an assassin for reasons that would make Connor's head spin. Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway is one of the rare Assassin's Creed protagonists who spends most of his story working against the assassins. Not by accident or doubt, he kills an assassin, steals his identity, and sells Brotherhood secrets to the Templars for cash. That's his grand entrance. Born in 1693, Wales, Edward starts as a privateer, but quickly becomes a full pirate during the Caribbean's Golden Age. In 1715, after a shipwreck near Cape Bonavista, he kills rogue assassin Duncan Walpole. Seeing Walpole's robes and secrets as a ticket to riches, Edward takes everything the Brotherhood guards and cashes in with the enemies. No ideology, no second thoughts, just the money. For most of Black Flag, Edward hunts the Observatory, a first civilization site he believes will make him rich. The West Indies mentor, Atabai, crosses his path many times, offering purpose and duty, but Edward always replies with variations on "Where's the gold?", which is awkward for an assassin in robes. But here's the thing about pirate fantasies. They crash hard. Blackbeard dies, Mary Read rots in prison. One by one, everyone Edward cares about vanishes. He ends up with a ship full of ghosts and zero gold. His change isn't one dramatic moment. It's a slow burn of loss that turns "what can I take" into "what have I been doing." He finally joins the Brotherhood, stops the Templars, and hands over his hideout. Back in Britain, he's pardoned, becomes a master assassin, and co-leads the British Brotherhood. Then he fathers Haytham Kenway, who grows up to be a Templar Grand Master. So yeah, that redemption, kinda pointless. But if Edward found the creed through grief, wait till you hear about the man who sailed beside him and found it in a much darker way, Adewale. Most protagonists in this franchise stumble into the Brotherhood through tragedy, betrayal, or some drunken accident involving a dead assassin's robes. Adewale walked in through the front door because everything he'd already survived pointed him there. Born in 1692 in West Africa to enslaved parents, sold as an infant and brought to Trinidad, his entire early life was defined by people treating him as cargo. During a naval battle in 1715, he escapes alongside Edward Kenway and becomes quartermaster aboard the Jackdaw. Here's the thing, he's standing on the same deck as Edward, sailing the same waters, fighting the same enemies. But where Edward sees gold, Adewale sees systems. He watches piracy's economics up close and recognizes the same machinery that enslaved him, just wearing a different flag. When the West Indies assassins enter the picture, Adewale doesn't need convincing. Their philosophy of liberation isn't some abstract ideal for him. It's literally his lived experience translated into action. He leaves piracy, joins the Brotherhood formally, and becomes one of their leading operatives in the region. Years later, shipwrecked in Saint-Domingue with nothing, he builds an entire resistance movement from scratch, liberating enslaved people, targeting French colonial infrastructure, functioning as both assassin and maroon leader simultaneously. By 1758, he's aiding the colonial Brotherhood at the siege of Louisbourg before being killed in action. No inner conflict, no philosophical hand-wringing, just a straight line from chains to hidden blade to revolution. But if Adewale represents the creed's purest ideals, the next entry represents what happens when those ideals shatter completely. Shay Patrick Cormac. Most entries on this list are about people becoming assassins. This one's about why someone stopped being one. Shay Cormac was born in 1731 in New York to Irish immigrants, orphaned young, and pulled into the colonial Brotherhood by his childhood friend Liam O'Brien. Standard recruitment. He trained under mentor Achilles Davenport in everything you'd expect: parkour, stealth, naval combat, hidden blade techniques. By all accounts, a competent and loyal field operative. Then Lisbon happened. In 1755, the Brotherhood sends Shay to retrieve a precursor artifact beneath the city. He touches it, the ground splits open, buildings collapse, tens of thousands of people die in one of the worst earthquakes in recorded history. And Shay knows, with absolute certainty, that he caused it. That his organization told him to do the thing that killed all those people. Here's the thing, this isn't Templar brainwashing. This isn't a man being tricked. This is a man standing in rubble watching families burn and realizing his side did this on purpose because they wanted a shiny object. He goes back to Achilles, begs him to stop chasing these artifacts, and gets dismissed. So he steals the Voynich manuscript and a precursor box to prevent it from happening again. The Brotherhood brands him a traitor. His best friend wants him dead. They shoot him off a cliff. He survives. Haytham Kenway finds him. And from that point forward, Shea systematically dismantles the colonial assassins until the Brotherhood barely exists by 1760. Later in 1776, he assassinates Charles Dorian in Versailles, orphaning a child who will grow up to become one of the most famous assassins in France, which is, poetic, in the worst possible way. But speaking of that orphan, let's talk about what happened next. Arnaud Dorian's life is basically a French soap opera written by someone who hates him. Born in Versailles in 1768 to a French assassin father he knew nothing about. Raised by a high-ranking Templar he thought was just a nice man who took him in. His girlfriend? Templar. His entire social circle? Templars. The man had assassin blood pumping through his veins while eating dinner with the enemy every single night of his childhood. Here's the thing. His biological father, Charles, gets assassinated by Shea Cormac in 1776. Arnaud's 8 years old, orphaned. And François de la Serre, one of the most powerful Templars in France, just decides to adopt him. Which is, not ideal for someone genetically predisposed to stabbing Templars. But the real gut punch comes in May 1789. François is murdered during an internal Templar coup at the Palace of Versailles, and Arnaud gets framed for the whole thing, thrown into the Bastille. The man has now failed to protect both his fathers, and he doesn't even understand why either of them died. In prison, he meets Pierre Balek, a master assassin who casually drops the revelation that Arnaud's real dad was one of them. Balek demonstrates a leap of faith off the Bastille walls into the moat below. Arnaud, a man with zero context for why anyone would do that voluntarily, follows him anyway. Desperate people do desperate things. He joins the Parisian Brotherhood not because he wants revenge or freedom, he wants absolution. Every rooftop sprint, every blade in the dark, it's all penance. Arnaud became an assassin because he couldn't live with the guilt of doing nothing twice. But if you think guilt is a rough motivator, wait until you meet someone who became an assassin purely because they were bored. Jacob Frye. Most assassins discover the creed through tragedy. Jacob Frye discovered it through boredom. Born in 1847 in Crawley, trained from childhood alongside his twin sister Evie, Jacob knew everything about the Brotherhood before he could shave. He just thought most of it was incredibly tedious. Here's the thing about Jacob. He's not rebelling against the Templars. He's rebelling against the assassins. The traditional Brotherhood wanted careful planning, measured responses, patience. Jacob wanted to punch industrialists in the throat. His father dies. The British Brotherhood does absolutely nothing, while Crawford Starrick's Templar Empire chokes London into submission, and the official assassin response is basically, let's wait and see. So in 1868, Jacob and Evie defy direct orders and head to London anyway. What does Jacob do when he arrives? Set up a hidden bureau? Establish intelligence networks? No. He starts a street gang. The Rooks, a full criminal syndicate that he runs like a Victorian fight club and calls it Brotherhood business, which is, not ideal from an operational security standpoint. His first major kill sets the tone. Rupert Ferris, an industrialist grinding factory workers into dust for Starrick's profit. Clean kill, righteous target, zero subtlety, that's Jacob in a nutshell. The problem is that liberating London borough by borough through gang warfare creates spectacular collateral damage. Every Templar he removes leaves a power vacuum that fills with chaos. Eventually, even Jacob has to admit that burning everything down isn't always a strategy. But if you think Jacob's approach to the creed is chaotic, wait until you see how his sister handles the exact same upbringing and arrives at the complete opposite conclusion. Evie Frye, every other assassin on this list, had to be dragged into the Brotherhood by tragedy. Evie Frye just read the manual and said, yes, this is exactly what I want to be, which honestly might be the most terrifying origin story of all. Born in 1847, same year as Jacob, same training under their father Ethan, same childhood in Crawley. But where Jacob treated the creed like a suggestion box, Evie treated it like scripture. She studied assassin history the way other people study for medical exams. Obsessively, thoroughly, with color-coded notes probably. After Ethan's death, both twins defy Brotherhood leadership and head to London in 1868. But here's the thing. While Jacob's off building a street gang and punching his way through industrial England, Evie is doing actual assassin work, tracking pieces of Eden, running intelligence networks, infiltrating Templar operations with surgical precision. Her primary target is Lucy Thorne, a senior Templar hunting the Shroud of Eden hidden beneath Buckingham Palace, and Evie dismantles Thorne's entire operation through patience, research, and tactical planning. No collateral damage, no burning down half of London first. She's the one working with established Brotherhood contacts, rebuilding the Creed's legitimacy through discipline rather than spectacle. The intellectual backbone holding everything together while her brother plays action hero. Evie didn't become an assassin because the world hurt her. She became one because she genuinely believed the philosophy was worth embodying. In an industrialized world that was leaving old traditions behind, she chose to be the person who kept the fire lit. But if Evie represents the Creed perfected through scholarship, the next assassin represents it being forged from raw, unimaginable grief, Bayek of Siwa. Every other name on this list became an assassin. Bayek built the thing from scratch. Born around 85 BCE, Bayek was one of the last Medjay of Egypt, a protector, a guardian of Siwa. He had a wife, Aya, a son named Kemu, and a life that made sense. Then in 49 BCE, masked members of the Order of the Ancients cornered him in a temple, forced a blade into his hands during a struggle, and Bayek killed his own son, not a Templar, not an enemy, his child. By his own hand. Here's what most people would do after that. Collapse. Disappear. Drink themselves into the sand. Bayek instead swore vengeance on every single person connected to the Order of the Ancients, and then actually followed through. He and Aya carved a bloody path across Egypt, dismantling the Order piece by piece. They allied with Cleopatra, believing she wanted the Order gone. Bayek served as her personal Medjay during the Alexandrine War. And then came the betrayal. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar didn't want the Order destroyed. They wanted its power redirected toward themselves. So Bayek and Aya did something no one had ever done before. In 47 BCE, they formally founded the Hidden Ones, a secret brotherhood built on discretion, protection of innocence, and opposition to those who would control humanity from the shadows. Bayek established the first bureau in Siwa, and spent his remaining years expanding the Egyptian Brotherhood under Roman rule. One father's grief became an institution that outlived empires, 2,000 years of assassins, and it all traces back to a man who couldn't save his son but refused to let that death mean nothing. But if Bayek built the Brotherhood, there's someone who walked a similar path centuries earlier without ever having a brotherhood to build. Cassandra. Cassandra is not an assassin. She predates the Brotherhood by about 4 centuries. But she does everything an assassin does, hunts a shadowy conspiracy, opposes the Order of the Ancients, fights for free will against authoritarian control. She just does it all without a hood or a creed to follow, which honestly makes her more impressive, not less. Here's the setup. Cassandra is a Spartan, daughter of Marine and the legendary Pythagoras. As a child, she's thrown from Mount Tagatos in a ritual that tears her family apart. That entire incident was engineered by the Cult of Cosmos, a secret organization that identified her bloodline as a threat and wanted every member of her family dead. By 431 BCE, Cassandra is living as a Misthios, a mercenary for hire, no family, no allegiance, no grand cause. Then she discovers the cult has their fingers in every war, every election, every power structure in the Greek world, and they're still hunting her family, so she hunts them back. Every masked member, every branch, systematically dismantled, but the cult isn't even her only problem. The Order of the Ancients also targets her because of her ECU hybrid nature and her alliance with Darius, a proto-assassin who killed Xerxes with the first recorded use of a hidden blade, and then comes the cosmic twist. Cassandra receives the staff of Hermes Trismegistus from Pythagoras after sealing Atlantis. The staff grants immortality. She lives from 431 BCE until 2018 CE, 2,400 years. One woman watching the entire Assassin-Templar War unfold from beginning to end, until she finally passes the staff to Layla Hassan. She never joins a brotherhood. One doesn't exist yet. But if you're looking for the spiritual prototype of everything the assassins would become, she's standing right there, 4 centuries early, doing it alone. But if Cassandra is the proto-assassin who never joins, wait until you meet the Viking who was handed the hidden blade and still couldn't commit. Eivor Varinsdottir. Eivor is the logical endpoint of everything this franchise has been building toward. She uses the hidden blade. She runs the bureau. She hunts every single member of the Order of the Ancients across England, and she never once calls herself an assassin. Here's the thing. Eivor's parents are killed in a raid led by Kjotve the Cruel when she's a child, and that trauma becomes the engine for everything she does afterward. She's raised as King Styrbjorn's foster child alongside Sigurd, who eventually travels to Constantinople and comes back in 872 with two hidden ones in tow, Basim ibn Ishaq and his apprentice Hethum. They bring the tools, the ideology, the target list. Eivor takes all of it and immediately puts it to work. When the Raven clan migrates to England, Eivor establishes Ravensthorpe as both a Viking settlement and a fully operational Hidden One headquarters. She campaigns across Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, forging political alliances and systematically assassinating Order leaders in every region. She's running intelligence networks, coordinating with Basim and Hytham, making tactical decisions about who dies and when. That's not an ally, that's a bureau leader. But she never swears the oath, never recites the creed, never formally joins. And honestly, that might be the most interesting statement the franchise has ever made. We started with Altair. Born into the Brotherhood, we watched Edward stumble into it by accident. We saw Bayek literally invent it. And now we have Eivor, who does all the work, carries all the weight, and simply never bothers with the title. Because the label was never the point. The work was. The Assassin's Creed franchise has killed off almost every single one of its protagonists. Some died as heroes, some died alone, and some got endings so brutal you'd think the writers had a personal vendetta. Today I'm breaking down how every protagonist met their end, starting with the one who arguably got the most peaceful send-off in the whole franchise, Altair ibn la-Ahad. Altair spent his entire life killing people, decades of it. He was the mentor of the Levantine Brotherhood, the most legendary assassin in the Order's history, and he lived to 92 years old. For a guy in his profession during the 1200s, that's basically immortality. But here's the thing. After all that violence, after all those years of war with the Templars, Altair didn't go out in some blaze of glory. He walked into his personal library, locked the door behind him, sat down with an Apple of Eden and the sixth memory seal, and just stayed there. He chose to die alone, guarding artifacts so powerful they could reshape the entire world. No final battle, no dramatic last words, just a warrior deciding he'd done enough. It's the quietest death in the entire franchise. And honestly, almost nothing that comes after it even comes close. Especially not what happened to Ezio Auditore. This is the one that still hurts. Ezio Auditore da Firenze spent decades as the most dangerous man in Italy. 3 entire games of climbing, stabbing, and dismantling Templar operations across 2 continents. He served as mentor of the Italian Brotherhood for a full decade before finally stepping down in 1513, and then he did something almost no assassin in this franchise ever gets to do. He stopped. Ezio retired to a Tuscan villa with his wife Sophia Sartor and their 2 children, Flavia and Marcello. He hung up the hidden blade, traded rooftops for a quiet life, and actually lived it. His last significant act as an assassin was training the Chinese assassin Xiao Jun, passing everything he knew to the next generation, not through violence, through teaching. And then, at 65 years old, while visiting Florence with his wife and daughter, Ezio sat down on a bench and suffered a heart attack. No Templars, no grand conspiracy, no final boss, just a man whose heart gave out. That's what makes it devastating. Gaming's most beloved assassin didn't die fighting. He died like a human being. The Embers short film turned a guy sitting on a park bench into one of the most iconic death scenes in gaming history. He got the one thing almost no character in this franchise ever gets: a normal ending. But if Ezio's death made you emotional, the next one made the entire fanbase furious. Desmond Miles. This is the big one. The death that literally saved the planet. Desmond Miles spent 5 games as a prisoner, kidnapped by Abstergo, strapped into an Animus, forced to relive the memories of his ancestors while the Templars picked through his DNA like a filing cabinet. He didn't ask for any of it, the guy was a bartender. But by December 21st, 2012, Desmond wasn't a victim anymore. The assassins had located the Grand Temple, an ancient ICU installation, hiding a device capable of stopping a catastrophic coronal mass ejection from wiping out human civilization. One problem: activating the device would also release Juno, a vengeful ECU entity imprisoned inside for millennia. So here's the trolley problem from hell. Option 1, don't touch the device, humanity gets nearly wiped out, and Desmond's legacy gets twisted into a tool for genocide. Option 2, flip the switch, save everyone, but unleash an ancient god with a grudge. Desmond chose option 2. He activated the device, the shield deployed, and Desmond died. Just like that, 25 years old, saving 8 billion people, and nobody outside the Brotherhood even knew his name. Fans are still divided on whether this was a bold narrative choice or a fumbled ending to the series' most important character. But love it or hate it, no other death in this franchise carries that kind of weight. And yet, compared to what happened to the next protagonist on our list, at least Desmond got a clear ending. Aveline de Grandpré. Aveline de Grandpré spent most of her story hunting a shadowy figure known only as the Company Man. This mysterious Templar had been pulling strings across Louisiana while Aveline tore through every lead she could find. After all that work, she finally uncovers the truth. The Company Man was her own stepmother, Madeline, which is, not ideal, but it gets worse. When Aveline brought this intel to her mentor Agathe, the one person who should have had her back, he completely lost it. Convinced she had betrayed the Brotherhood, he tried to kill her. She defeated him, and rather than face the consequences, Agathe threw himself off a cliff. So her stepmother is a Templar mastermind, and her mentor just committed suicide in front of her. Cool. Here's where Aveline goes. Full ice cold. Instead of spiraling, she used Agathe's death as a cover story. She pretended to join the Templar Order, walked into her own induction ceremony like everything was fine, and then killed Madeline and every Templar in the room. No hesitation, no monologue, just execution. But here's the frustrating part. After all of that, we have zero idea how Aveline actually died. She's confirmed as an ancestor of Subject 1, so she survived long enough to have descendants. Beyond that, nothing. The first female protagonist in the series, and her fate is a complete blank. I don't know what to tell you. But if Aveline's ending is frustratingly vague, Connor's is frustratingly depressing. Connor Kenway. Connor is the one that hurts the most, and I don't mean in a dramatic, heroic, blaze of glory kind of way. I mean in the way that actually sticks with you at 2 a.m. when you're staring at the ceiling. Born Ratanhanake Tun, Connor was a master assassin of Kanyenkehaka descent who threw everything he had into the American Revolution. He genuinely believed that fighting for freedom would build a better world for his people, for his family, for everyone. The guy gave up his youth, his safety, and his identity for a cause bigger than himself, and the world repaid him with almost nothing. By the end of the game, Connor watches the very nation he helped build immediately begin selling his people out. His allies move on. George Washington, the man he bled for, signs orders that directly harm the Kanyenkehaka. Connor wins the war and loses everything the war was supposed to protect. Supplementary canon like the Reflections comics show Connor eventually married and had daughters, and he continued his assassin work. So it's not all darkness, but that almost makes it worse. He kept going, kept fighting, kept building a brotherhood in a country that already proved it would never return the favor. No heroic last stand, no peaceful bench in Florence, just a man still grinding away at a mission the world already forgot about. Connor didn't get a death scene. He got something worse. He got to watch his entire life's purpose get undermined in real time by the people he saved. But if Connor's ending is the cruelest in the franchise, his grandfather, Edward's, might be the most violent, Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway lived exactly 42 years. That's it. 42 years to go from a greedy Welsh privateer chasing gold across the Caribbean to a genuinely committed assassin who believed in something bigger than himself. And the universe rewarded that transformation by murdering him in his own living room. Here's the thing about Edward. After everything he survived, the pirates, the Templars, the entire Caribbean trying to kill him on a daily basis, he actually made it out. He retired. He moved his family to their estate in London, hung up the hidden blades, and chose peace. He chose his kids. He chose a normal life. On December 3rd, 1735, Templar Grand Master Reginald Birch sent mercenaries to the Kenway household with 3 objectives: kill Edward, steal his journal, and kidnap his daughter Jennifer. They accomplished all 3. Edward was murdered in the one place he thought was safe, the home he'd built specifically to escape the violence that defined his entire adult life. But the worst part isn't even his death. It's what happened after. The trauma of watching his father get killed and his sister get dragged away destroyed his son Hatham. That boy grew up and walked directly into the arms of the Templar Order. Birch didn't just kill an assassin, he created a Templar. One murder, and the Kenway bloodline flipped sides for an entire generation. Reginald Birch is one of the most despicable villains in the franchise specifically because of this. He didn't beat Edward in a fight. He waited until Edward was happy, then took everything from him. But if Edward's death created a Templar, wait until you meet the assassin who willingly became one. Shay Patrick Cormac. Shay is the franchise's moral wildcard, and honestly, he might be the most interesting protagonist Assassin's Creed has ever produced. Because depending on which game you're playing, he's either the hero or the villain. Sometimes both at the same time. Here's the setup. Shay started as a member of the Colonial Brotherhood, trained assassin, full commitment, the whole deal. Then he defected to the Templar Order and never looked back. Not once. He remained a Templar loyalist until the day he died, which is a sentence that should make every assassin fan deeply uncomfortable. Starting in 1752, Shay captained the Morrigan and spent the next 16 years hunting Isu artifacts across the globe for the Templars. 16 years of sailing, fighting, and tracking down precursor technology for the other team. His most significant act came in 1776 when he assassinated the assassin Charles Dorian in Versailles and reclaimed a precursor box. If that last name sounds familiar, it should. Charles Dorian was Arno's father. Shay literally created the next game's protagonist by killing his dad, which is, not ideal. After retrieving the box, Shay continued traveling the world searching for more Isu artifacts, and then the record just stops. His actual death is never documented anywhere in the franchise. No tomb, no final cutscene, no database entry explaining how he went out. The man who lived between two worlds simply vanished from history. And honestly, that feels right. A protagonist who is simultaneously an antagonist deserves an ending that nobody can pin down. But speaking of the kid he orphaned in Versailles, let's talk about what happened to Arno Dorian. Arno Dorian's story is one of the most tragic in the entire franchise, and he never even gets the dignity of a proper death scene. Let me explain. Arno was orphaned at 8 years old when his father, Charles Dorian, was assassinated in 1776. And here's where it gets really messed up. The person who killed his father, Shay Cormac, the protagonist of the previous game. You literally played as the guy who ruined this kid's life. That's one of the coldest cross-game connections Ubisoft has ever pulled off, and nobody talks about it enough. After losing his father, Arno was adopted by Francois de la Serre, who was secretly a Templar, so this kid went from an assassin household to a Templar household without even knowing it. And then, because the universe apparently wasn't done with him, Francois was murdered too, and Arno was framed for it, thrown into the Bastille. At this point, the guy's basically collecting parental deaths like their achievements. He escaped during the storming of the Bastille after a fellow prisoner named Pierre Belec recruited him into the Brotherhood. And during his initiation, Mirabeau declared that Arno had died with his sins and failures and was reborn as a novice assassin. That's the only death Arno gets. A metaphorical one, a symbolic shedding of his old self, his actual physical death, never addressed. Not in the games, not in the novels, not in any canonical material. He just exists in this permanent state of narrative limbo, which is, not ideal. But if you think an unresolved fate is frustrating, wait until you meet the Fry twins. Fry Jacob. Fry co-assassinated Grandmaster Crawford Starrick alongside his twin sister Evie, effectively dismantling organized Templar power in Victorian London. That alone should have been enough for a comfortable retirement. Maybe a nice pub, a medal, a quiet life. But Jacob is not a quiet life kind of guy. After Evie left for India with her husband Henry Green, Jacob stayed behind to rebuild the British Brotherhood and lead the Rooks, the gang network the twins had built from nothing. For 20 years, he ran London's underground assassin operations. 20 years of keeping the peace, training new recruits, and maintaining order. And then one of those recruits decided to become Jack the Ripper. Here's where it gets dark. In 1888, one of Jacob's own apprentices went completely rogue, seized control of the Rooks, and adopted the identity of history's most infamous serial killer. The student literally overthrew the master. Jacob's entire network, the thing he'd spent 2 decades building after his sister left, was ripped away from him by someone he personally trained. Which is, not ideal. It gets worse. Jacob was captured by the Ripper. The man who helped liberate all of London needed his sister to come back from India and save him. Evie returned, killed the rogue apprentice, and ended the Ripper's reign of terror. Jacob survived, but his pride probably didn't. As for how Jacob actually died, nobody knows. His death is never documented. What we do know is his legacy continued through his granddaughter Lydia Fry, who served the Brotherhood during World War I, so at least the family business stayed open. But if Jacob's story has a few gaps, his sister Evie's ending is even harder to pin down, Evie Fry. After everything we just covered with Jacob, you'd think the Fry family was destined for disaster. But Evie looked at her brother's catastrophic leadership, looked at the long history of assassins dying alone or getting stabbed in their own homes, and said no thank you. After she and Jacob took down Starrick and secured the Shroud of Eden, Evie married fellow assassin Henry Green and relocated to India, not as a retreat, not as exile, as a deliberate expansion of the Brotherhood's influence into new territory while also building the personal life she wanted, which is, not something assassins are historically great at. Here's the thing, almost every protagonist we've covered so far had to choose, duty or love, the Brotherhood or family. Ezio came closest to having both, but even he spent decades in violence before he got there. Evie just decided she was going to have the whole package from the start. Love, purpose, legacy, zero documented tragedy. She continued mentoring new assassins in India, training the next generation while building a life with Henry that actually lasted. Her specific death is never recorded. No ambush, no betrayal, no rogue apprentice burning everything down, just descendants who carried on the Brotherhood's work, proving she built something that outlived her. She might be the only protagonist on this list who genuinely won. But if Evie represents the best possible ending for an assassin, the next entry represents someone who started the entire thing from scratch and paid dearly for it. Bayek. Bayek of Siwa is the man who started everything. Not a chapter of the Brotherhood, not a regional branch, the entire thing. Born around 85 BCE, he was the last Medjay of Egypt, a title that carried centuries of warrior tradition behind it. And when the Order of the Ancients murdered his son Kemu during a failed attempt to crack open an Isu vault, Bayek didn't just seek revenge, he built an institution. In 47 BCE, alongside his wife Aya, Bayek co-founded the Hidden Ones. That organization would eventually evolve into the Assassin Brotherhood, meaning every single protagonist we've talked about in this video owes their creed, their philosophy, and their entire operational structure to this one grieving father from Siwa. That's a legacy that outlasted empires. But here's where it gets quietly devastating. We don't actually know how Bayek died. The details are sparse. What we do know is where he chose to be buried. Players can discover Bayek's final resting place in the Hotep Cavern in the Katara Depression, a location he personally selected, not because it was strategically important, not because it held some Isu artifact. He chose it because that's where he and Aya fell in love. The man who founded an organization dedicated to fighting tyranny across millennia made his final decision not about war, but about love. And when Layla Hassan discovers his tomb over 2,000 years later, his remains are still there, exactly where he wanted to be. I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes the quietest endings hit the hardest, but if Bayek's death was defined by choosing where to rest, the next protagonist's death was defined by finally being allowed to. Cassandra. Every other protagonist on this list had death come for them. Cassandra had to go find it herself. After wiping out both the Cult of Cosmos and the Order of the Ancients from Greece, Cassandra met her father Pythagoras, who handed her the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, one piece of Eden, one gift, biological immortality, which sounds incredible until you realize what it actually meant. 2,000 years. Alone. The Isu consciousness. Aletheia, stored inside the staff, gave Cassandra a single directive: wander the globe, find dangerous pieces of Eden, and destroy them. So that's what she did. For 20 centuries. She watched the Roman Empire rise and fall. She watched plagues sweep continents. She watched every single person she ever loved grow old and die while she just kept walking, and walking, and walking. Then in 2018, she met Layla Hassan, an assassin who had relived Cassandra's genetic memories to locate the gateway to the lost city. Cassandra looked at this woman, handed her the staff, and immediately died. No fight, no illness, no dramatic last stand. She simply let go of the thing keeping her alive and stopped existing. Her final act was extracting a promise from Layla to destroy every remaining piece of Eden and restore the balance between order and chaos. 2 millennia of solitary guardianship, condensed into one request and one handoff. She's the only protagonist who had to actively choose to become mortal again. Everyone else had death forced on them. Cassandra had to walk up to it and say yes. That's either the most tragic ending in the entire franchise or the most merciful one, probably both. But if you think choosing your own death is heavy, wait until you see where Eivor ended up spending hers. Eivor Varinsdottir, a Viking who conquered England, chose to die on the other side of the world in total obscurity. Let that sink in for a second. After eradicating the Order of the Ancients from England and ensuring the Hidden Ones had a permanent foothold on the island, Eivor did something nobody expected. She left. After 889, she turned her back on everything she'd built, everyone she'd fought beside, and sailed for Vinland to chase Isu knowledge buried in Odin's memories. And here's where it gets quietly beautiful. Eivor spent her final years not raiding, not conquering, not building alliances. She lived among the indigenous Kanyenkahaka people, which, if you're paying attention, directly connects her story to Connor's ancestry centuries later. She spent her days conversing with Odin's consciousness, finding a kind of peace that England never could have offered her. A warrior who shook an entire country chose stillness. She died there, in Vinland, and her grave sat undisturbed for over 1,000 years. No monument, no saga, no Viking funeral. Just bones in the earth on a continent most of Europe didn't even know existed yet. But here's the kicker. In 2020, the assassins discovered Eivor's remains and used her genetic memories to locate the Yggdrasil chamber, which allowed them to prevent a global catastrophe. Her death literally saved the world, not when it happened, but a millennium later. Most protagonists in this franchise are lucky if their sacrifice matters in the same century. Eivor's mattered across 10 of them. It echoes Altair's peaceful withdrawal, sure, but Altair locked himself in a library. Eivor's grave became the key to humanity's survival, which is, slightly more impressive. But if you think dying peacefully means your story is over, wait until you hear about the protagonist who technically never died at all. Basim Ibn Ishak. Basim is the protagonist that breaks the entire format of this video, because I genuinely cannot tell you how he died. I'm not even sure he can die. Let me explain. Born around 844 CE, Basim ibn Ishak served as a master hidden one during the 9th century, operating out of Baghdad and assassinating high-ranking members of the Order of the Ancients. On paper, he's a standard Assassin's Creed protagonist, skilled, dedicated, effective. But here's the thing, Basim isn't just Basim. He's a human vessel for the Isu entity Loki, the actual Norse trickster god, walking around in a 9th century Iraqi man's body like it's a rental car, which means every question about his death gets filtered through this bizarre philosophical lens. Did the man die? Did the god die? Can the god die? I don't know what to tell you. What I can tell you is the human side of Basim's story, and it's not flattering. Before any of the cosmic Isu nonsense, Basim was orphaned as a child after his father died and left him with nothing. A kid alone on the streets of Baghdad. Whatever divine consciousness was already stirring inside him, none of it mattered to a child surviving alone in the caliphal capital. That's the tragedy of Basim. You can debate whether an Isu reincarnation is truly mortal, but the boy who grew up parentless on those streets was very much human, and very much shaped by that suffering. His ultimate fate remains completely undocumented. No tomb, no death scene, no quiet bench in Florence. For all we know, Loki's still out there somewhere, wearing a different face, which is, not ideal. But speaking of protagonists whose stories are still being written, let's talk about one of the franchise's newest additions, Fujibayashi Naoi. Naoi is the newest protagonist in the entire franchise, and her story isn't about some grand philosophical revelation or ancient conspiracy. It's about losing everything and deciding to build it back anyway. She's the fictional daughter of Fujibayashi Nagato, a real historical figure from Japan's Iga province. In 1581, Oda Nobunaga launched the Tensho Iga War, sending his forces to systematically wipe out the shinobi clans. Naoi's home, her people, her entire way of life was annihilated in a single campaign. She survived. Most didn't. After the invasion, she partnered with Yasuke to hunt down members of the Shinbakufu, a secretive organization founded by the ousted shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki, who was basically using every tool at his disposal to claw back power. Together, they dismantled the group piece by piece. And once that was done, Naoi turned her attention to something arguably harder than killing: rebuilding. By 1582, she had reconstructed the Brotherhood from the ashes of Iga's destruction. There's also a personal thread running through all of this. evidence surfaced suggesting her mother, Tsuyu, might still be alive, which is, a pretty significant emotional complication when you're trying to rebuild an entire organization from scratch. As for how she dies, she doesn't. Not yet. Naoi is the most recently introduced protagonist in the franchise, and her story is still actively ongoing. No documented death, no gravestone, no final cutscene. She represents the future of Assassin's Creed, and whatever fate awaits her hasn't been written yet. But her partner? His story has a very different kind of mystery surrounding it. Yasuke. Yasuke is the only protagonist on this list who is a real person, not inspired by a real person, not loosely based on historical events. An actual human being who lived, breathed, and then vanished from recorded history entirely. Born around 1555 in Eastern Africa, Yasuke arrived in Japan in 1579 alongside the Jesuit missionary Alessandro Valignano. When Oda Nobunaga met him, the most powerful warlord in Japan was so fascinated that he granted Yasuke a sword, a house, a stipend, and the rank of samurai, not as a novelty, as a genuine member of samurai society, the first recorded foreigner to ever receive that honor. Yasuke served Nobunaga loyally until June 21st, 1582, when everything fell apart. Nobunaga's own vassal, Akechi Mitsuhide, launched a surprise attack at Honnoji. Yasuke fought until Nobunaga was dead, then joined his son Nobutada at Nijo Castle, fighting again until they were overwhelmed. He was captured. And then Mitsuhide made a strange decision. He spared Yasuke's life, declaring that because he was not Japanese, he should be sent to the Jesuits instead. 5 months later, a Jesuit missionary named Louis Frois wrote a letter thanking God that Yasuke had survived. That letter is the last confirmed record of Yasuke's existence. No death record, no grave, no further mention in any document, anywhere, ever. A man who became the first foreign samurai in Japanese history simply disappeared. Nobody knows if he stayed in Japan, returned to Africa, or lived to old age. The answer is literally lost to time. Every other protagonist on this list has a story, a theory, or a final cutscene. Yasuke has a 500-year-old letter in silence. Every Assassin's Creed protagonist carries weight, loss, betrayal, watching everything they built crumble while history forgets they existed. But some of them got it so much worse than others that it's honestly hard to rank. So today, I'm breaking down the most tragic protagonists in the entire franchise, and we're starting with the one everyone underestimates, Jacob Frye. Jacob Frye gets written off as the fun one, the brawler, the twin who'd rather punch a blighter in the throat than read a single page about precursor artifacts. And sure, that's technically accurate, but here's the thing, that personality wasn't Jacob escaping tragedy, it was Jacob burying it. Born in 1847 alongside his twin sister Evie, Jacob lost his father young, not in some dramatic cutscene way, just gone. And instead of processing that like a normal human being, he got handed the Assassin's Creed and told to get to work. Evie took the intellectual route, chasing Pieces of Eden, studying assassin history. Jacob built a street gang from nothing, dismantled Templar-controlled industries with his fists, and essentially rebuilt London's Brotherhood on his own back. Nobody thanked him for it. After he and Evie assassinated Crawford Starrick in 1868, you'd think the story gets better. It doesn't. Evie married Henry Green and left for India. Jacob stayed, alone, in a city that had zero idea he existed. He kept fighting, kept doing the Brotherhood's dirty work decade after decade. No recognition, no title, no statue, just more work and more silence. He was still alive at roughly 67 when World War I rolled around. He and Evie were quietly shuffled off to the countryside, while their granddaughter Lydia took over London operations. And then, nothing. No documented death, no grave that matters. Just a lifetime of thankless work followed by silence. That's Jacob Frye, the guy who smiled through all of it. Which is, not ideal, but if you think quietly fading into history is tragic, wait until you hear what happened to the twin who left. Evie, Frye, if Jacob dealt with losing his father by punching everything that moved, Evie dealt with it by never allowing herself to feel anything at all. Same trauma, same Brotherhood upbringing. Two completely opposite survival strategies. And honestly, it's hard to say which one is worse. Where Jacob externalized his grief as chaos, Evie internalized it as a need for perfection. Every mission had to be flawless. Every objective had to be met. She threw herself into recovering the Shroud of Eden with the kind of obsessive focus that only comes from someone terrified of what happens when they stop moving. Because if she stopped, she'd have to actually sit with the fact that her father was gone and the Brotherhood was all she had left. And here's the thing. While she's doing all of this, being the disciplined twin, the reliable one, the assassin who actually reads the creed before bed, she's also suppressing her feelings for fellow assassin Henry Green for years. Not because she didn't care about him, but because caring about someone felt like a distraction from the mission, which is, not ideal. Jacob got to be messy. Jacob got to feel things in real time, loudly, in front of everyone. Evie gave herself zero permission to do any of that. Her entire emotional life was on hold because the Brotherhood needed her to be serious, and she believed that meant she couldn't also be human. She did eventually marry Henry after Starrick's death. They moved to India together, and by Assassin's Creed standards, that's practically a fairy tale ending. But even that decision was filtered through loyalty to the cause. She didn't retire. She relocated to serve the Brotherhood somewhere else, and just like Jacob, she fades from the historical record entirely. Alive until at least 1914, then nothing. No grave anyone talks about, no public legacy. Decades of sacrifice and emotional suppression, and the world moved on like she never existed. But at least Evie got something resembling a personal life. The next assassin on this list didn't even get that luxury, and he lost everything trying. Edward Kenway. Everyone loves Edward Kenway. And honestly, why wouldn't you? He's a pirate. He's got the jackdaw. He's sailing around the Caribbean, stealing everything that isn't nailed down. Black Flag is one of the most beloved games in the entire franchise, and a huge part of that is because Edward's fantasy is so fun to live in. But here's the thing about fantasies. Someone always pays for them. Edward was born in Wales in 1693, married Caroline Scott, and immediately decided that domestic life wasn't enough. He wanted wealth, he wanted adventure, he wanted to be somebody. So he left. He escaped captivity on the Spanish treasure fleet in 1715, alongside Adewale, stole ships, killed people, and spent years chasing gold across the West Indies like it was the only thing that mattered. And while he was doing all of that, Caroline died. She was 29 years old. Disease took her while Edward was somewhere in the Caribbean, probably celebrating a heist. 8 years of marriage, and he spent most of it at sea. He never got the chance to come home, to fix things, to be the man he promised her he'd become. That door just closed, permanently. But the real tragedy of Edward Kenway isn't Caroline. It's what happened after he finally got his act together. See, Edward didn't join the Assassins because he believed in the creed. He joined because it was convenient. The Brotherhood's philosophy only genuinely reached him after years of loss had stripped away everything he thought he wanted. The treasure, the glory, the freedom, all of it hollow. By the time he truly committed to the Assassins, he had nothing left except the cause itself, and then the enemy found him anyway. London. Edward was 42 years old. Templars, led by Reginald Birch, raided his home and murdered him. The man who had finally become someone worth respecting was cut down by the very order he'd spent years fighting, in a city thousands of miles from the Caribbean waters that defined him. His son Hatham watched it happen. Birch took the boy under his wing after killing his father, raised him, groomed him, and Hatham became a Templar Grand Master, which is, not ideal. But if you think Edward's story is painful, wait until you hear about the one protagonist who got 3 entire games and still couldn't escape tragedy. Ezio Auditore, you already know this one. Everybody knows this one. Ezio Auditore is the face of Assassin's Creed, the guy on the posters, the guy in the cosplays, the guy whose name people can actually pronounce at parties. He's the franchise's golden child. And that's exactly why his story hits different when you actually sit with it. December 29th, 1476. Ezio is 17 years old, standing in Florence's Piazza della Signoria, watching his father Giovanni and his brothers Federico and Petruccio hang from the gallows, publicly, in front of the entire city. Men his family had trusted, men his father had worked alongside, orchestrated the whole thing. Ezio didn't get a funeral. He didn't get a week to process. His mother basically broke, fled into a catatonic state, and suddenly, this teenager who'd spent his mornings chasing girls across rooftops was now the sole protector of what was left of his family. Nobody asked him if he wanted this. Nobody gave him a choice. And then he just kept going. For 48 years. Let that number breathe for a second. 48 years of service to a brotherhood he never signed up for. He saved Florence. He saved Venice. He liberated Rome from Borgia control. He traveled to Constantinople in his 50s to train Ottoman assassins. And in his final years, he was still mentoring the Chinese assassin Xiao Jun, still passing on knowledge, still giving. The man literally never stopped. Here's where it gets complicated, though. Ezio's ending is the gentlest on this list. He died at 65 of a heart attack on a bench in Florence, sitting next to his wife Sophia, their daughter Flavia nearby. Peaceful. quiet, in the same piazza where his family was executed nearly 50 years earlier. And on paper, that sounds like closure. That sounds like the universe finally cutting the guy some slack. But it wasn't that simple. In his final years, Ezio carried a question he could never answer. Did any of it matter? Decades of fighting, killing, sacrificing every personal desire he ever had for a cause that was thrust on him at 17, and he died not knowing if it was enough. The franchise's most beloved protagonist closed his eyes, having given literally everything, and his last private thought was doubt. That's the thing about Ezio. We remember the charm, the confidence, the iconic hood. We don't sit with the fact that underneath all of it was a man who spent his entire adult life wondering if the cost was worth it, which is, not ideal, but at least Ezio got a bench and a sunset. The next assassin on this list didn't even get that. Altair ibn La'ahad. Every other name on this list exists because of this man. Altair didn't just define the assassin brotherhood. He basically built it from the ground up, spread it across continents, and then died alone in the dark underneath the very fortress he gave his entire life to. And the worst part is the tragedy started before he could even walk. Altair was born on January 11th, 1165, to a Christian mother and a Muslim father. His mother died bringing him into the world. His father, Umar ibn Lahad, was executed by Al-Mualim after killing a nobleman to protect the Brotherhood's secrets. So before Altair could form a single memory of either parent, both were gone. The Order raised him. The Order fed him, trained him, gave him purpose, which sounds noble until you realize what that actually means. Every single piece of his identity belonged to an institution, not a family, an institution, and he spent 92 years trying to be worthy of it. Here's where it gets complicated. In 1191, Altair botched a mission to recover the Apple of Eden, broke all three tenets of the creed in one go, and triggered a full Templar assault on Masyaf. His mentor, Al-Mualim, stripped him of his rank and essentially told him to start over from nothing. Most people would leave. Altair didn't. He couldn't. The Brotherhood was all he had. So he clawed his way back, spent decades as mentor making revolutionary discoveries through the Apple, codified assassin philosophy into the Codex, and expanded the Brotherhood into Europe and Asia. He literally reshaped the entire organization. The cost was everything personal. His wife Maria was killed. His son Sef was murdered by Abbas Sofyan, a traitor inside the Brotherhood. The same Brotherhood Altair had rebuilt with his bare hands. And Abbas? His bitterness toward Altair stretched back decades, to a moment when young Altair told him the truth about his own father's suicide. Altair accidentally created the man who would destroy his family. That's not irony. That's a curse. By the end, Altair was 92 years old, exiled by his own surviving son Darim. He walked into a hidden chamber beneath Masyaf, sat down, and sealed himself inside with the Apple. The man who defined the Assassin Order, who gave it a philosophy, a structure, a global reach, died sitting in the dark with nobody beside him. 66 years as mentor. 0 people at his side when it mattered. But if Altair's tragedy is about giving everything to a cause that couldn't love him back, the next one is about a man who destroyed the cause entirely and might have been right to do it. Shay Patrick Cormack. Most people on this list became tragic because the world happened to them. Shay is different. Shay became tragic because he tried to do the right thing, and it worked, and it was still wrong. Born in 1731 in Ireland, Shay trained as a colonial assassin under Achilles Davenport. He was loyal, he was capable, and in 1755, the Brotherhood sent him to Lisbon to retrieve a precursor artifact from a seismic temple hidden beneath the Carmo convent. Standard mission: go in, grab the artifact, come home a hero. He activated the temple, and the entire city collapsed. The 1755 Lisbon earthquake killed tens of thousands of people in minutes. Buildings folded, fires spread, the ocean pulled back and swallowed what was left. And Shay watched it happen, knowing he was the one who triggered it. Here's where it gets complicated. Shay went back to the Brotherhood and told them what happened. Told them these temples were weapons, not treasure chests. Told them chasing precursor artifacts without understanding them was going to get more people killed. And the assassins, the people he trusted with his life, tried to murder him for it, shot him off a cliff, and left him for dead. So he joined the Templars. Not because he wanted power, not because he was angry, because he genuinely believed the assassins were reckless idealists who would sacrifice thousands of innocent lives for their mission and sleep fine afterward. And for 16 years, he hunted his former brothers one by one. He killed Adewale, he killed Hope Jensen, he killed Chevalier de la Vérendrye, and in 1776, at Versailles, he killed Charles Dorian while reclaiming the very precursor box that had destroyed his faith in the first place. The fan debate around Shay is loud. Was he right? Was he wrong? Was leaving the Brotherhood justified, but joining the Templars a step too far? Both sides have a point. But here's the thing, none of it matters, because the assassins sent him into that temple knowing full well what previous expeditions had done. They had already caused the Haiti earthquake in 1751 the exact same way, and they still sent Shay in blind. The Brotherhood he trusted didn't betray him with a bullet off that cliff. They betrayed him the moment they handed him that mission without telling him the truth. So Shay switched sides, and he spent the rest of his life believing the Templars were the lesser evil, never fully grasping that he'd traded one group of manipulators for another. He died loyal to the Templar Order, never questioning, never doubting, convinced to the very end that he'd chosen the right side. Altair lost everything and understood why. Shay lost everything and understood nothing. He just thought he did, which is so much worse. And the man he killed at Versailles, Charles Dorian, he had a son, a boy who grew up without a father because of Shay's mission. That boy's name was Arno Dorian. Most of the assassins on this list had their lives destroyed by external forces. Someone invaded their home, killed their family, burned their village. Arno Dorian is different. Arno destroyed himself. He was 8 years old when his father, Charles Dorian, was murdered at the Palace of Versailles in 1776. And if that name sounds familiar, it should, because Charles Dorian is the same man Shay Cormac killed earlier on this list. So Arno's tragedy literally begins where Shay's ends, which is, not ideal. After Charles's death, Arno was taken in by Francois de la Serre, the Grand Master of the Templar Order. The boy whose father was an assassin was raised inside a Templar household by the leader of the entire operation. He grew up alongside Francois's daughter Elise, fell in love with her before he had any idea what assassins or Templars even were, and built his entire emotional foundation on a relationship that was structurally impossible from the start. But here's where it gets complicated. Arno joined the Brotherhood, got pulled into the chaos of the French Revolution, and watched everything collapse. Francois was murdered. Multiple Brotherhood subordinates died on Arno's watch. The council exiled him. He killed his own mentor, Pierre Balek, after Balek's extremism made him a threat to both sides. And Elise, the one person Arno was fighting for above everything else, died before he could save her. Every single thing the creed cost him, it cost him personally. Not politically, not strategically, personally. Then came the drinking. The depression was so severe that the Brotherhood he'd sacrificed Elise for wanted nothing to do with him. He was a ghost in a city full of guillotines, and nobody cared. But the thing that defines Arno's psychology more than any of that is a vision. A recurring nightmare where he chases his father's killer through dark corridors, catches him, pulls back the hood, and sees his own face staring back at him. His subconscious had decided that he was responsible for Charles's death, not Shay, not the Templars, him, an 8-year-old boy who happened to be in the wrong palace at the wrong time. That guilt poisoned everything he touched. It's why he could never fully accept Elise's Templar identity, because the war between the factions wasn't just political for Arno, it was the thing that killed his father. And it's why he couldn't save Elise, even when he was physically standing right there. Arno was never fully present. He'd been chasing a hooded version of himself through corridors in his own head since he was a child, and no amount of blade work was going to fix that. The cruelest part is that his guilt was completely disproportionate to his actual culpability. He didn't kill Charles. He didn't cause the revolution. He didn't make Bellic go rogue, but he carried all of it like it was his fault, and that weight crushed him more effectively than any Templar conspiracy ever could. Most assassins on this list were broken by the world. Arno was broken by himself. But if you think internal self-destruction is the worst kind of tragedy an assassin can face, wait until you see what happens when the world takes everything from you and then asks you to say thank you. Connor Kenway. Connor Kenway was doomed before he was born. Half British, half Mohawk, belonging fully to neither world, and carrying a name that would guarantee him nothing but suffering in every direction he turned. When Connor was a child, his Mohawk village was burned to the ground. He watched his mother Kanyatiweo die in the fire, and he spent years believing Charles Lee was the one who did it. That belief became his entire identity. It wasn't grief, it was a mission. Every skill he learned, every blade he sharpened, every alliance he forged with the Assassin Brotherhood was built on a foundation of, I'm going to find that man, and I'm going to kill him. And when he finally understood the full picture, when he learned the truth about who was actually responsible, it didn't fix a single thing. His mother was still dead. The fire still happened. The only difference was that now the rage had nowhere clean to point, but the isolation is what really got him. Connor was too native for the colonists he fought alongside, too compromised for the Mohawk elders who saw his British father's blood as a betrayal, and too idealistic for the Assassin Brotherhood who tolerated his passion but never prioritized his people. He existed in the gap gap between three worlds, accepted by none of them. Every room he walked into, he was the outsider. And then there's Hatham. Connor's father was the Templar Grand Master. Let that sit for a second. The man running the organization Connor had sworn to destroy was his own father. And in 1781, the two of them finally collided in one of the most emotionally devastating confrontations in the entire franchise. Hatham knew exactly who he was fighting. He chose that outcome. And in his final moments, before Connor ended his life, Hatham revealed genuine feeling for his son. Not regret, not surrender, just acknowledgement. I should have killed you long ago, which is, not ideal as a final father-son bonding moment. Connor won. He killed Hatham. He hunted down Charles Lee. He helped build the American Revolution from the ground up, and none of it mattered. The assassins he served never prioritized the Mohawk people. The patriots he bled for became just another controlling power, redistributing land that wasn't theirs and building systems of oppression on the bones of the old ones. The Templar threat he had sacrificed his father and his childhood to eliminate simply reorganized under new management. Different names, same machinery. Connor spent his final years watching the world he had fought for calcify into the exact same oppressive structure he had tried to destroy. No family left to soften it. No brotherhood that truly understood him. No country that saw him as anything other than useful. He didn't just lose people. He lost the belief that fighting could change anything at all. Every single thing he sacrificed, his mother, his father, his identity, his youth, fed into a machine that kept grinding forward without him. Most assassins in this franchise lose something. Connor lost the ability to believe the loss was worth it. But if Connor's tragedy was political, structural, baked into systems bigger than any one man could fight, then the next entry is something rawer. Something that starts with a father holding his dead son and ends with an entire brotherhood built on that grief. Bayek of Siwa. Every single name on this list, every hidden blade, every creed ever whispered in the dark, exists because of one moment in 49 BCE. A father watching his son die and being completely powerless to stop it. Bayek was a Medjay. That's not just a job title. It's a bloodline of protectors stretching back centuries. Guardians of Siwa who kept their people safe from anything the desert threw at them. His son Kemu was supposed to inherit that legacy. Instead, members of the Order of the Ancients dragged Bayek and Kemu into a vault beneath Siwa and had the boy killed while Bayek stood there, restrained, watching his child die in front of him. This wasn't collateral damage. This was a group of masked men deliberately killing a child because he was inconvenient to their plans, and they made his father watch. That single act broke everything Bayek was. The protector who couldn't protect, the Medjay whose bloodline ended in a dark room. So he did what anyone would do with that kind of grief. He turned it into a weapon. Bayek and his wife, Aya, spent years hunting every member of the order across Egypt. They killed them one by one. And when it was over around 47 BCE, they took that grief and built something out of it. The Hidden Ones. An organization dedicated to fighting corruption from the shadows. An organization that would eventually become the Assassin Brotherhood. Every protagonist on this list is a direct consequence of what happened to Kemu. Every creed recited, every leap of faith taken, every blade drawn from a bracer traces back to a father who lost his son in Siwa. Bayek didn't just start a revenge quest. He accidentally started a global movement that outlived him by thousands of years. But here's where it gets quiet instead of loud. The Brotherhood didn't just cost Bayek his son, it cost him his wife. Aya became Amenet, shed her old name entirely, and moved to Rome to lead the Hidden Ones expansion. She chose the cause over the marriage. The very organization Bayek built to honor Kemu's memory became the thing that pulled Aya away from him for good. He lost his son to the Order. He destroyed the Order. He built something meant to make sure it never happened again. And that something took his wife too. Bayek is the most important person in the entire Assassin's Creed timeline, the Foundation Stone, and he spent his remaining years in Egypt, alone, the mentor of an organization that had already outgrown him. No son, no wife, just sand and a creed that would echo for millennia without ever mentioning his name. Not all stories have a moral. All stories have... Some of them are just a man building a cathedral out of grief and then sitting inside it by himself forever. Assassin's Creed has spent 17 years building protagonists whose stories end in completely different ways. Some go out and sacrifice. Some close a chapter of grief they carried for decades. Some finish a war they never asked to start. Today, we're breaking down the 9 most pivotal final missions across the franchise, ordered by game release date from Ezio's first real test inside the Brotherhood to Basim's double identity endgame in 9th century Baghdad, starting with the sequence that turned a grieving son into something far more dangerous. Requiescat in pace. Most people know this phrase because Ezio said it after every single kill in Assassin's Creed 2, rest in peace. Except Ezio himself got anything but peace, and the mission titled after his signature line proves it. Sequence 3 contains exactly 5 memories: roadside assistance, Casa Dolce Casa, practice makes perfect, what goes around, and a change of plans. The entire sequence takes place between 1476 and 1478, spanning 2 years of Ezio's early assassin life following the execution of his father and brothers in Florence. By the time this sequence ends, Ezio hasn't even hit 30 yet. He's young, angry, and still driven entirely by personal revenge. The sequence builds toward Ezio's earliest steps inside the Brotherhood, training under Mario Auditore at the Villa Monteriggioni, and beginning to understand that what destroyed his family wasn't a local grudge, but something much older and deeper. The Templars aren't random enemies, they're an organization, and taking them down one by one isn't vengeance, it's war. Sequence 3 is where Ezio stops reacting and starts becoming a weapon. The phrase requiescat in pace becomes loaded when you realize what it actually signals. It's closure, but whose closure exactly? Ezio thinks he's ending his family's story by hunting down the men who signed their death warrant. He's not. He's just beginning his own chapter as an assassin. The irony is brutal. Every time he says rest in peace over a dead Templar, he's pushing himself further from ever finding peace himself. The sequence resolves Ezio's initial arc of raw grief while simultaneously pulling him into something much larger than himself. He ends it not as a grieving son, but as a functioning instrument of the Brotherhood. The game earns this shift with genuine emotional weight. You feel Ezio's transformation happen in real time as he realizes revenge alone won't bring his family back, but preventing other families from suffering the same fate might give their deaths meaning. But if you think Ezio's first steps into the Brotherhood were intense, wait until you see how his story concludes decades later when he finally tracks down the man who makes every Templar he's killed so far look like a warm-up act, the heir to the Empire. Ubisoft literally changed who killed a real historical figure, and almost nobody even noticed. The final mission of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood takes place at the Battle of Viana in 1507. Cesare Borgia, the bastard son of Pope Alexander VI, and the man who once held Rome in his grip, died at this battle. That part is historically accurate. What the history books won't tell you is that Ezio Auditore da Firenze was the one who finished him. Here's the thing. This confrontation happens 3 years after Ezio dismantled Borgia power in Rome. 3 years. That's not a dramatic sprint to the finish. That's a slow, grinding pursuit across Spain, chasing a man who went from ruling an entire city to dying as a mercenary captain for the King of Navarre. The mission itself is structurally more complex than anything the series had done before. 9 separate objectives. Not go here, kill this person. 9 distinct tasks including reject the base and material and seek salvation in the flames. Earlier AC games gave you linear climaxes. Brotherhood made you work for it. And here's where Ubisoft got clever with the history. Cesare Borgia did die at Viana in 1507. Historically, he was unhorsed and run through with spears by enemy soldiers. The game has Ezio hurl him from the castle walls instead. Same location, same year, completely different method. Ubisoft kept just enough of the historical record to make it feel grounded, then quietly swapped out the cause of death. Most players never even questioned it, but the real story is what this mission represents for Ezio. This isn't Assassin's Creed 2, where a grieving son hunts his family's killers. By Brotherhood's end, Ezio isn't a man with a vendetta anymore. He's a general who just won a war. When you finally throw Cesare off that wall, there's no euphoria. Just a tired assassin who's ready to move on. Rome is free, the Borgias are finished, and Ezio is done being angry. But if you think watching a seasoned master assassin close out a years-long conflict is heavy, wait until you see what happens when the last living assassin faces impossible choices in a first civilization temple, the last of the assassins. You spend 3 games trusting Lucy Stillman. She's the Abstergo scientist who helps Desmond escape. She's the one standing between him and the Templars. She's the reason the entire modern-day plot moves forward, and then in one cutscene, with zero warning, Desmond stabs her in the stomach and she dies. Before you assume this was some random plot twist, hear me out. The ending of Brotherhood locks Desmond into something called a sync nexus, which is basically a mental collapse. His consciousness is fracturing because he's relived too many memories from too many ancestors. To stabilize himself, he has to push through the final buried memory the Animus has been hiding from him. The game doesn't give you a choice, you're just along for the ride. The mission takes place right after Desmond and his team locate the Apple of Eden beneath the Colosseum in Rome. That specific location matters because it's where the Grand Temple's influence over Desmond becomes undeniable. Everything the Brotherhood has been working toward converges in that chamber, and the payoff is not what anyone expected. Inside the Nexus, Desmond confronts Juno, the Isu entity who had been quietly embedded in the Apple's systems, waiting. Nobody, not the characters and not the players, fully realized she was pulling strings until this exact moment. She reveals Lucy as a Templar mole. No build-up, no foreshadowing that made sense in retrospect, just a flat declaration that the woman you trusted was working for the enemy. Then Juno forces Desmond to stab her. You don't get to refuse. You don't get a dialogue option. The sequence plays, Lucy collapses, and Desmond falls into a coma. That's how Brotherhood ends. The community response was significant enough that petitions calling for Ubisoft to reconsider killing Lucy gathered tens of thousands of signatures. People were that invested in her as the connective tissue holding the modern-day story together. The backlash wasn't just about Lucy's death, it was about what the ending signaled. Desmond falling into a coma wasn't a cliffhanger, it was a writing team hedging their bets, setting up an exit strategy from the modern-day narrative entirely. But at least Desmond's collapse had a purpose, unlike the protagonist who dies for literally no reason in the next game. The path of revenge. Assassin's Creed 3 forces you to kill someone you arguably liked more than the protagonist. Connor Kenway's final confrontation with his father Hatham takes place on June 5, 1781, atop a cliff overlooking New York City, and the entire sequence is built around a single brutal truth. This conversation ends only one way regardless of what you choose. Hatham Kenway was the founder and Grand Master of the colonial rite of the Templar Order, making him the most powerful Templar in the Americas. He's also Connor's father. That's the narrative compression Assassin's Creed 3 built its entire identity around. The mission features a dialogue system where Connor must choose specific responses during their final exchange. You can be understanding, defiant, or attempt reconciliation. None of it matters. The kill is structurally inevitable. But watching two ideologically opposed men who share blood argue over whether freedom or order saves more lives, that's what the dialogue system controls. And it's more uncomfortable than most final boss fights have any right to be. Here's where it gets bleak. Connor's journey to this moment spans 20 years. The Templar-ordered burning of his Mohawk village in 1760 killed his mother when he was 4. He spent 2 decades hunting the people responsible, working through the entire Revolutionary War, only to discover his own father leads the organization that ordered her death. And Hatham's continued pursuit of Templar control means Connor's endgame isn't even about personal closure anymore. It's about preventing his father from reshaping the outcome of the American Revolution itself. The mission ends with neither man changed. Hatham never concedes Connor is right. Connor never concedes his father had a point. They argue until one of them dies and that's it. No catharsis, no reconciliation, no last breath pride, just two men whose philosophies allow for no middle ground. That was a deliberate choice. The writers wanted to make a statement about ideological conflict having no clean resolutions, and they succeeded. The community still divided over whether that was brilliant or whether Ubisoft wasted the father-son dynamic by defaulting to the predictable ending. Either way, it's one of the few Assassin's Creed finales that feels genuinely unresolved, which is rare for a franchise that usually wraps things up with emotional closure. But if you think killing your father to save a revolution is complicated, wait until you see what happens when Desmond has to make a choice that affects all of humanity inside the Grand Temple, the Temple. Desmond Miles saves the world by empowering the next villain, and the game frames this as heroic. Let me explain. December 2012. Beneath New York City, the Grand Temple. Desmond navigates 6 distinct chambers, each representing one of the first civilization's proposed methods for preventing an incoming geomagnetic catastrophe. Solar flares, electromagnetic pulses, the complete collapse of modern infrastructure. But here's where it gets complicated. The mission presents Desmond with an impossible binary. Follow Juno's instructions and activate the temple's protective mechanism, which releases her consciousness into the world. Or follow Minerva's guidance and let humanity survive on its own terms without empowering either Isu faction. There's no third option, no clever workaround, just 2 terrible choices. Desmond chooses to activate the temple. He sacrifices himself in the process, his veins open to power ancient machinery, blood fueling a device built by gods who died millennia ago. The game treats this as a victory, heroic sacrifice. The modern-day protagonist giving everything to save billions of lives. Players immediately recognized it as the setup for a villain the franchise would spend years failing to meaningfully develop. Juno becomes the next antagonist, except she doesn't, not really. She floats around as a digital ghost for a few games, shows up in cutscenes, and then gets resolved in a comic book tie-in rather than a mainline entry. The mission promises closure for a 5-game arc that started in 2007. What it delivers is a cliffhanger that never pays off. The timestamp matters. 11:11 p.m., December 21st, 2012. Ubisoft locked this into canon to mirror the cultural moment of the Mayan calendar end date, tying an in-game apocalypse to real-world mass anxiety. The mission occurs at the exact moment millions of people genuinely believe the world might end. That's commitment to thematic resonance, even if the follow-through collapsed. Desmond's death ends the modern-day Protagonist arc. The franchise has never fully replaced him. Every subsequent entry struggles with the absence of a comparable anchor. No modern-day character carries the same weight. Players complained about Desmond for years, called him boring, said they just wanted to play as the historical assassins. Then he died, and everyone realized what they'd lost. The connective tissue holding everything together, gone. The Temple mission reveals the franchise's ultimate narrative problem in microcosm: ambitious setup, weak execution. A protagonist sacrifices himself to empower a villain who gets resolved off-screen in supplementary material most players never experience. Desmond saves the world and becomes irrelevant in the same moment. But if you think modern-day narrative disappointment defines this franchise's final missions, wait until you see the spectacle Ubisoft pulled off during Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. A Night to Remember. The final mission of Assassin's Creed Syndicate takes place during Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee on June 20th, 1887, which is, a completely normal backdrop for an assassination plot. Nothing says covert operation quite like thousands of celebrating Londoners packed into Buckingham Palace grounds while you're trying to dismantle a secret society. Here's the thing. This isn't just historically accurate set dressing. The Golden Jubilee actually happened on that exact date. The white drawing room you infiltrate during this mission is one of the most detailed location reconstructions in the franchise, with the chandeliers, the wall paneling, and the dimensions of the doorways all drawn from historical records of Buckingham Palace. The mission itself is cataloged as Sequence 9, Memory 4, and it requires you to free 8 captured royal guards split into 2 groups of 4 across the palace grounds before the Templar operation can be completed. But here's where it gets tactical. You need to identify a specific Templar operative using Eagle Vision. He shows up highlighted in red among the crowd of Jubilee guests. Capture him as a hostage, use him to force access into the white drawing room, and that's where the primary objectives conclude. What makes this mission interesting, though, is how it handles the Fry twins. Both Jacob and Evie reach the same endpoint, recovering Templar operational plans that effectively sever the Order's control over London's infrastructure, but they do it through completely different gameplay approaches. Evie prioritizes stealth, methodical planning, silent takedowns. Jacob defaults to combat, charging in with brass knuckles and zero patience for anything resembling subtlety. The mission doesn't force you into one style or the other. It just presents 2 protagonists with opposing methods converging on identical results, which is either a statement about assassin flexibility or proof the game couldn't commit to a single tonal identity, depending on how charitable you're feeling. The community remains split on whether this properly concludes the twins' contrasting philosophies. Some argue Evie's meticulous planning undermines Jacob's chaotic approach without providing meaningful resolution to their ideological differences throughout the game. Others think the flexibility is the point. 2 methods, 1 outcome, no judgment passed on either. Either way, the mission ends with the Fry twins dismantling the last major Templar stronghold in Victorian London during one of the most publicly visible celebrations in British history. Buckingham Palace, full crowd. Queen Victoria presumably somewhere nearby having a lovely evening. At least they managed it without causing a diplomatic incident, unlike the Medjay who had to deal with literal mind control and an apple of Eden. The last of the Medjay. Bayek is the last Medjay, and the game never lets you forget it. Not in a heavy-handed, dialogue dump kind of way, but in the quiet, constant weight of every interaction you have across Egypt. People look at him differently. They speak to him differently. Some with reverence, some with desperation, some with the particular exhaustion of people who stopped believing help would ever come, and then watched it walk through their door anyway. Here's the thing about the Medjay. They weren't just soldiers or police or bodyguards, though they were all of those things depending on who needed them. The Medjay were an institution, a symbol, a promise that someone was watching, that someone with actual training and actual authority cared whether ordinary people lived or died. By the time Bayek is wandering through Siwa at the start of Origins, that institution is essentially dead. He's it, the last one. And the game is deeply interested in what that means for a man whose entire identity was built around belonging to something larger than himself. What makes this work so well is that Bayek never performs grief about it. He doesn't monologue about the weight of being the last Medjay, or stare dramatically into sunsets about legacy. He just keeps doing the job. Someone's kid is missing, he finds the kid. Someone's crops are being destroyed, he handles it. The mundane, grinding, endless work of being the person a community depends on, carried out by a man who has every reason to walk away and apparently zero interest in doing so. But here's where it gets complicated. The Medjay as an institution existed to serve the pharaoh. That was the structure, the chain, the reason the whole thing had legitimacy. And the pharaoh's Egypt, by the time of Origins, is a rotting system held together by Roman occupation and political corruption. So Bayek is a man whose role was defined by loyalty to a structure that no longer deserves loyalty. He keeps the title, keeps the duty, keeps showing up for people, but the thing he was supposed to serve has collapsed under its own weight. The game uses this tension without quite resolving it, which is actually the correct choice. Bayek doesn't get a clean answer about what the Medjay should mean in a broken Egypt. He just keeps moving forward, village by village, wrong by wrong, functioning as a one-man institution in a country that forgot institutions were supposed to protect people instead of exploit them. There's something genuinely interesting in the fact that the brotherhood he accidentally helps create, the Hidden Ones, eventually becomes the thing that fills the vacuum the Medjay left. A different kind of institution, different methods, different rules, but the same basic impulse. Someone has to do this. Might as well be people who actually care. Bayek would probably hate that framing, which is maybe the point, where it all began. Here's the thing about Assassin's Creed Odyssey that nobody really talks about. It doesn't just tell a good story, it quietly rewires your understanding of everything that came before it. The where it all began mission is the clearest example of that. On the surface, it looks like a closing chapter, a tidy bow on Cassandra's personal journey, but pull back the camera a little, and you realize what it actually is. The origin point of one of the most iconic organizations in gaming history, set more than 2,000 years before the franchise's modern storyline even begins. We're in 422 BCE. The Peloponnesian War is tearing Greece apart, Sparta and Athens are grinding each other into dust, and in the middle of all that chaos, Cassandra is quietly laying the groundwork for what will eventually become the Hidden Ones, and later the Assassin Brotherhood. She's not doing it with a grand speech or a ceremony. She's doing it the way most world-changing things get done, one decision at a time, with nobody around to applaud her for it. The Spear of Leonidas is central to all of this. It's not just a weapon. It's a piece of Eden, a fragment of precursor technology that Cassandra inherited through her bloodline, and it's already ancient by the time she's carrying it. Her grandfather Leonidas used it at Thermopylae. The fact that it ends up in her hands isn't coincidence, it's lineage. The Brotherhood didn't just randomly emerge from history, it was seeded through specific families, specific bloodlines, across generations. Cassandra is one of those seeds. Her relationship with Marine ties directly into this. Marine isn't just Cassandra's mother, she's a former member of the cult of Cosmos who broke away, which means Cassandra's entire arc is built on inherited conflict. She was born into a war she didn't choose, against an organization her own family helped build, which is, not ideal for your personal development. The mission's ending leans into this hard. Cassandra sailing away on the Adrestia isn't framed as victory, exactly. It's more like the beginning of a very long responsibility. She's not done. She's just getting started, and the game knows you know that, because you've played enough Assassin's Creed to understand how this story eventually ends, even if it takes 2 millennia to get there. But here's where the timeline gets complicated. Odyssey's placement in the broader franchise continuity created real friction when it launched. The retcon concerns weren't just fan nitpicking. Fitting a fully realized proto-brotherhood into a history that already had established origin points required some creative stretching of the lore, and not everyone was convinced the seams were holding. Some players felt it enriched the mythology, others felt it quietly broke things that didn't need fixing. Both of those reactions are completely reasonable, which tells you everything about how carefully constructed this mission actually is. The best lore additions are the ones that split the room. Safe additions don't generate arguments that are still running years later. A new beginning. Basim ibn Ishaq is either the most straightforward protagonist Assassin's Creed has ever given us, or the franchise's longest-running con, depending on which game you played first. If you started with Mirage, he's a petty thief who becomes a master assassin. If you played Valhalla first, you already know he's the villain. That's the hook. The entire final mission exists in this weird state where it's simultaneously an origin story and dramatic irony. The mission takes place in 861 CE Baghdad during the Abbasid Caliphate's golden age, the most advanced center of scholarship in the medieval world. The House of Wisdom housed an estimated 400,000 books at its peak. Ubisoft rebuilt it using surviving architectural records, and it's one of the most historically grounded location reconstructions the franchise has ever attempted. Here's where it gets layered. The mission reimagines the assassination of Caliph al-Mutawakkil, which historical records confirm happened at the hands of Turkish palace guards. Mirage inserts the Hidden Ones as the architects. Same playbook as Brotherhood with Cesare Borgia. Take a documented killing, claim the assassins did it, and suddenly the Brotherhood feels embedded in real history. The mission ends with Basim defeating the Grand Mufti, the man who betrayed his mentor Roshan. But it's not just personal closure. Basim formally establishes the Hidden Ones Baghdad Bureau here, grounding the franchise's mythology in the Islamic Golden Age instead of the usual European settings. The Hidden Blades deployment is framed not as routine, but as the formal beginning of a doctrine every subsequent assassin would inherit. The blade isn't just a tool, it's the creed itself, and this mission shows its earliest canonical use in service of that ideology. But the modern-day thread is what makes this mission more than a conclusion. Layla Hassan is sequencing Basim's DNA, and the game reveals his connection to the first civilization. The Isu consciousness inside him is Loki. This arc is entirely set up for his return as an antagonist in Valhalla, which means the new beginning framing is doing double duty. Origin story for Basim the assassin, and handoff to Basim the villain. The community split on this. Critics argued the transformation felt disconnected, that Mirage's arc didn't justify who he becomes in Valhalla. Defenders pointed to the Isu possession thread as sufficient canonical grounding. The debate never fully resolved. Mirage positioned itself as the franchise's most ambitious narrative bridge between the classic formula and the RPG era, and whether it succeeded depends entirely on how much weight you give the Loki reveal. The double identity hook is what makes this mission stick. New players get a clean hero's journey. Valhalla veterans get dramatic irony baked into every scene. That tonal split is unprecedented in the franchise. Mirage is simultaneously a fresh start and a prequel depending on your entry point, and the final mission leans into that ambiguity without resolving it. Some players think it nailed both sides. Others think it failed at one or the other. The fact that the argument is still alive means the mission did something right. From secret rites to stolen treasures, the Hidden Blade has shaped every assassin's journey in unforgettable ways. Each protagonist's path to this iconic weapon reveals a unique story of sacrifice, innovation, and defining moments. Let's start at the beginning, with the original assassin, whose brutal induction set the stage for a legacy of shadow warfare and deadly precision, Altair ibn La Ahad. Altair's Hidden Blade set the brutal standard for all assassins. He didn't just get his blade handed over in some ceremony, you had to lose something first, literally. His left ring finger was amputated to make room for the blade's mechanism and to seal a symbolic bond with the Brotherhood. This was total commitment, not a casual scar. The moment Altair acquired the blade is never shown. You start the game with it already part of his gear, implying a harsh, off-screen initiation in the 1191 Levant Brotherhood. The blade was a spring-loaded dagger hidden in a bracer, triggered by a ring on that missing finger. Losing the finger was both mechanical necessity and ritual. His first major kill with the blade we see is Tamir in Damascus, after Altair's fall and redemption. That kill rebloods the blade, marking his return to the Brotherhood after being stripped of rank. But here's the kicker. Altair didn't just accept this brutality. Using the Apple of Eden's secrets, he redesigned the blade to eliminate finger amputation. He swapped the ring for a palm-activated switch and added a poison delivery system, changing the Brotherhood's weapon for good. Next, we leap to Renaissance Italy, where Ezio takes up the blade and the legacy, with major upgrades thanks to Leonardo da Vinci, Ezio Auditore da Firenze. Ezio's Hidden Blade story isn't about tradition, it's about inheritance, both tragic and transformative. When he first finds the weapon, it's broken, a relic left behind by his father Giovanni, whose secret assassin life was hidden from Ezio's noble Renaissance world. This isn't the monastic ritualistic blade Altair had. It's a symbol of a family legacy violently interrupted but ready to be reborn. Before Ezio fully embraces his destiny, Altair improves the Hidden Blade design, and Leonardo da Vinci reconstructs and adapts the weapon for Ezio using Altair's codex. This refinement removes the need for finger sacrifice and marks a new era in assassin gear. The blade feels sleek and fitting for chaotic Renaissance Italy. Ezio upgrades further, wielding dual hidden blades and adding poison darts plus a small hidden gun in his gauntlet. The blade becomes a versatile platform for creative assassinations. Ezio's first big kill with the restored blade is Uberto Alberti, the corrupt official who caused his family's death. This brutal Florence street strike is more than vengeance. It's Ezio claiming his role as a true assassin, stepping out of Altair's shadow. But here's the kicker. Ezio's journey is deeply personal, driven by family blood and Leonardo's brilliance, not brotherhood ritual. Up next, a very different Hidden Blade story, Connor Kenway's assassin path on the American frontier. Connor Kenway. Connor Kenway's journey to the Hidden Blade is a formal rite of passage, unlike the more haphazard or inherited acquisitions of his predecessors. Trained by Achilles Davenport, the grizzled mentor of the Colonial Brotherhood, Connor earns his blade through dedicated apprenticeship on the rugged American frontier. It's not theft, and it's not inherited. It's a deeply personal gift, marking his transformation from a reluctant youth into a committed assassin. Before anyone rolls their eyes at the peaceful ceremony vibe, this moment is loaded with symbolic weight. Achilles doesn't just hand over a weapon, he confers trust, legacy, and responsibility. The blade itself is a mature design, fully integrated into a practical leather gauntlet suited for the harsh wilderness. There's no mutilation here, no ring finger sacrifice like Altair's era. Instead, it's a mechanically refined tool you'd actually want strapped to your forearm while sneaking through snow and underbrush. Connor's first major kill with the Hidden Blade is William Johnson, a corrupt British official involved in land deals undermining Native American tribes. This kill isn't just an assassination. It marks Connor's ideological coming of age. It's the moment he commits fully to the assassin cause, realizing the Brotherhood's fight is bigger than personal vendettas or survival. It's about freedom and justice in a rapidly changing world. Here's where it gets interesting. Connor's blade represents the Enlightenment era shift in assassin identity. The emphasis moves away from bodily sacrifice toward grounded ideology and skill. The Hidden Blade becomes a symbol of purpose, not pain, a mature weapon for a mature conviction. But if you think a mentor's gift in the forest is low-key, wait until you hear how a pirate accidentally steals his way into assassinhood. Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway's Hidden Blades have one of the most unceremonious origins in Assassin's Creed history. He literally steals them off a dead assassin. Early in Black Flag, Edward kills Duncan Walpole, a rogue assassin defecting to the Templars, and takes his blades along with his assassin outfit and papers. No ritual, no mentorship, no welcome to the Brotherhood, just gear looted from a corpse. A practical tool for a pirate focused on profit rather than creed, yet these very blades become the instruments of Edward's transformation. At first, he uses them while impersonating Walpole, killing just to survive and keep up appearances with Spanish authorities. His first assassinations aren't about ideology but necessity. Over time, rubbing shoulders with Caribbean assassins like Atabai and Mary Red, Edward begins to embrace the creed, the stolen blades symbolizing his shift from selfish conman to reluctant assassin. Physically, Edward's blades represent the mature post-amputation design, mounted on the forearm, spring-loaded, and dual-wielded for agile swashbuckling combat. No finger removal or ceremonies here, just slick, practical tools optimized for a pirate's style. The dual blades let him chain kills on ship decks or swing from rigging with fluid flare. Here's the thing. Edward's story flips the usual assassin narrative. Instead of belief leading to blades, it's blades before belief, a stolen identity becoming his own. That irony makes his hidden blades less a symbol of commitment and more a catalyst for it. But if Edward's acquisition is opportunistic theft, Adewale's story takes a very different tone. Adewale's acquisition of the Hidden Blades is one of those behind-the-scenes assassin moments that's never shown on screen, but says a lot just through what's left unsaid. After breaking free from slavery and joining Edward Kenway's pirate crew, Adewale eventually becomes a fully fledged assassin himself, likely receiving his blades through a formal induction sometime after Black Flag's events. Unlike Edward's stolen gear or Ezio's family inheritance, Adewale's relationship with the blades feels deeply tied to emancipation and justice. His blades reflect the Brotherhood's 18th century tech, spring-loaded and wrist-mounted, no ring finger amputations required. They're the standard issue at this point, slick, reliable, and fully mature in design. The DLC Freedom Cry wastes no time showing how Adewale uses these blades, not for politics or power struggles, but to liberate slaves, take down brutal overseers, and strike at the heart of the slave trade. His first documented kills with the blades involve storming plantations and slave ships, symbolically framing the hidden blade not just as an assassin's tool, but as a weapon of freedom. Here's the thing. Adewale's acquisition is deliberately kept mysterious. We infer his induction from his status as a trained assassin when Freedom Cry begins, making the moment feel less about spectacle and more about quiet transformation. The weapon becomes an extension of his fight for justice, a sharp contrast to earlier protagonists, whose blades often signify secret wars between shadow factions or personal vengeance. Adewale's story reclaims the hidden blade as a symbol of resistance for the oppressed. If you thought a simple pirate's quartermaster turning into a liberator was compelling, wait until you hear how a rogue assassin flips the script in the brutal garrisons of Shay Patrick Cormac. Shay Patrick Cormac flips the Assassin's Creed script in one of the darkest twists the series has ever seen. Unlike other protagonists, Shay starts his journey as a loyal assassin trained by Achilles Davenport himself at the Colonial Brotherhood's homestead, receiving his dual hidden blades through traditional initiation, no finger amputation needed, just the standard mid-18th century tech perfected by the Order. His blades are classic assassin gear, sleek, spring-loaded, and deadly in both stealth and open combat. But here's where it gets wild. Shay becomes disillusioned with the Brotherhood after a catastrophic mission triggers the Lisbon earthquake, which only reinforces his belief that the assassins have lost their way. His response? He turns his very own hidden blades against the Brotherhood, defecting to the Templars. Imagine that, the iconic symbol of assassin loyalty repurposed as an instrument of betrayal. It's not just a weapon for Shay. The blades embody his ideological rupture and moral complexity. They slice through more than just flesh. They cut the ties that once bound him. Visually and mechanically, Shay's blades stay consistent with assassin tradition, dual forearm-mounted daggers capable of swift kills without the gruesome need to lose a finger. But as his allegiance shifts, the blade's symbolism deepens. They become a dark reminder that tools alone don't define a killer, the cause they serve does. Shay's story challenges the black and white worldview of assassins versus Templars, showing how blurred and personal that line really is. If you think the Hidden Blade story couldn't get more complicated, wait until you see Arno Dorian's version and the revolution it sparks. Arno's journey with the Hidden Blade mixes tradition, innovation, and personal conflict during the chaos of the French Revolution. After his release from prison, Arno officially joins the French Brotherhood and is given the standard Hidden Blade, a symbol of his full commitment as an assassin. But his weapon doesn't stop evolving. The French cell equips him with a revolutionary upgrade, the Phantom Blade. This turns the classic wrist blade into a hybrid assassination tool, combining a hidden knife with a compact wrist crossbow that fires silent bolts from a distance. Before you chalk the Phantom Blade up to just flashy tech, it actually changes everything. Its ranged component lets Arno take out targets quietly without drawing a sword, perfect for slipping through Paris's crowded streets and towering rooftops. Ubisoft calls this a key leap in the Hidden Blade's evolution, transforming it from a simple stabbing device into a versatile stealth assassin's weapon. Arno's first kills with the blade go beyond Creed duty. They're deeply personal, tied to his quest for vengeance against the Templar-linked de la Serre family amid France's revolutionary turmoil. Each strike weighs private loss alongside political upheaval, showing Arno's tangled loyalties and fractured identity. The Phantom Blade's design captures this chaos, a blend of old-school craftsmanship and cutting-edge tech, mirroring how Arno navigates his divided world. Unlike past assassins who use the blade as a pure ideological symbol, Arno's weapon doubles as a tactical platform born of necessity and desperation. But here's the kicker. The blade symbolizes brotherhood tradition, yet Arno's story pulls him between personal revenge and the larger cause, making his use as much about emotional conflict as stealth. If you think that's impressive, wait until you see how the Victorian Fry twins revolutionized the Hidden Blade. Jacob Fry. Jacob Fry is the definition of a street-level assassin. Raised in the Brotherhood alongside his twin sister Evie, he never has a big cinematic moment where he first pulls out his hidden blade. Instead, he's already armed and ready. A fully trained assassin diving headfirst into Victorian London's gritty underworld. The message is clear. Jacob's hidden blade isn't some surprise relic. It's the product of years of Brotherhood training. No initiation needed for a guy born into this life. His hidden blade design fits the industrial age perfectly. Heavy brass accents and Victorian craftsmanship fused with deadly practicality. This isn't a delicate Renaissance trinket. The gauntlet packs a traditional spring-loaded blade, a knuckle duster, and a rope launcher, turning it into a brutal all-in-one weapon. Perfect for brawling in tight alleys and scaling grimy factory walls. The blade stays hidden, but strikes fast, matching Jacob's rough, no-nonsense attitude. Jacob's first big kill with the blade is brutal and symbolic. Rupert Ferris, a Templar-aligned factory owner exploiting London's workers through unsafe labor. This assassination isn't about silent stealth. It's a direct hit amid gang wars and social revolt. Jacob wields the blade like an enforcer's weapon, mixing Brotherhood stealth with industrial rebellion. It becomes a symbol of resistance, cutting through urban chaos, gang fights, and systemic oppression. The iconic assassin tool adapts to mass conflict, hostile streets, and factory-era violence. While Evie is the calculated scholar, Jacob is all fists, brass, and hidden blades, turning that weapon into a street-level force. But if you think Jacob's style is rough, wait until you see how Evie uses that blade in the shadows. Evie Fry might not grab the spotlight as much as her brother Jacob, but her command of the hidden blade is the purest expression of assassin discipline in Victorian London. Trained from youth alongside Jacob, Evie steps into the creed, and her lethal trade already armed and ready, the game skipping over any grand ceremony to show her blade acquisition. It's accepted knowledge that she earned it through rigorous training and unwavering dedication. Her hidden blade's design mirrors Jacob's. A sleek Victorian-style gauntlet with brass accents and a spring-loaded blade concealed under the forearm. But here's the twist. It's less about raw brawling power and more about precise surgical strikes done in silence. Evie's moves emphasize stealth, patience, and deadly efficiency. She's the one who ghosts through shadows, not the one who kicks down the door. This contrast between the Fry twins perfectly captures a thematic tension in Syndicate, between innovation through brute force and adherence to the stealthy, traditional assassin way. The first major assassination Evie carries out with her blade is that of David Brewster, a Templar scientist dangerously meddling with a piece of Eden beneath London's factories. This mission highlights her role as a guardian of the Creed's core tenets, stopping Templar exploitation of First Civilization relics, preserving secrets, and respecting the Brotherhood's mission above personal glory. Unlike Jacob's street-level gang warfare, Evie's work is quieter, more philosophical, and tactical. In essence, Evie embodies the tightrope walk of modernization within the Brotherhood, balancing the need to adapt to a brutal industrial era without sacrificing the Creed's enduring values. Her hidden blade isn't just a weapon, it's a symbol of silent power and tactical restraint. But if you thought Victorian England was the high point for assassin tradition, wait until we dive into the ancient origins of the hidden blade with Bayek of Siwa. Bayek's story is where the hidden blade legend begins, a raw, ancient prototype born not out of tradition, but out of necessity and accident. Unlike later assassins who inherit their blades through formal rites, Bayek receives his from his wife Aya during the founding of the Hidden Ones, the Brotherhood's earliest incarnation. This blade is less refined, more brutal, a symbol of a new era brewing in the shadows of Ptolemaic Egypt. Before you think this was a clean, heroic gift, here's the kicker. During his first assassination attempt with the blade, targeting the Order of the Ancients member Eudoros, Bayek accidentally severs his own ring finger. Because Eudoros managed to grab and clamp Bayek's hand shut, the blade slid forward improperly, slicing through Bayek's finger in a way that terrified and shocked him. This mishap then transformed into the origin of the Brotherhood's famous ritual of finger sacrifice, turning a clumsy accident into a sacred tradition, symbolizing commitment and loss. The first kill itself is foundational. Bayek's deadly strike against Eudoros marks the birth of the Hidden Ones as a secret, ideologically driven order, blending physical sacrifice and spiritual awakening. This moment ties the blade's lethal function directly to a personal cost and an ideological birth, a pattern all future assassins will emulate, mythologize, and codify. The blade Bayek wields isn't just a weapon, it's a raw prototype linking the brutal reality of blood and sacrifice to the soaring ideals that shape the Brotherhood's entire ethos. But here's where it gets weird. This origin story complicates everything we thought we knew about assassin finger loss. It wasn't a clean, intentional act right away. It started as a chaotic accident that was later ritualized, a blend of human error becoming doctrine. Bayek's blade is the oldest relic in assassin history, a testament to how the Brotherhood's identity was forged through both chance and symbolism. If Bayek's blade is the ancient seed, then the next protagonist, Cassandra, takes us even further back, into a proto-assassin era where the weapons and sacrifices look very different. Cassandra stands apart from every other Assassin's Creed protagonist because she never actually wields a hidden blade. Instead, her signature weapon is the Spear of Leonidas, an ancient Isu-enhanced artifact passed down through her Spartan royal bloodline. This isn't just any spear, it's a First Civilization relic granting her supernatural precision, combat skill, and the ability to perform stealth assassinations with deadly efficiency. Functionally, it acts like a precursor to the hidden blade, an ancestor blending mythic power with lethal stealth. Here's the twist. While other protagonists inherit or are gifted hidden blades tied to the Brotherhood or Hidden Ones, Cassandra's spear is rooted in family legacy and mythic status. It belonged to King Leonidas himself, and is less a Brotherhood weapon and more a symbol of her unique link to Spartan heritage and ancient Isu technology predating the Assassin Order. Her first kills with the spear, especially early takedowns of Cult of Cosmos members, paint her as a proto-assassin. The Cult is a Greek-era version of the Templars, and Cassandra's systematic elimination of their agents echoes the classic Assassin versus Templar conflict millennia earlier. This sets up her spear not just as mythical, but as an early chapter in the franchise's hidden war. Fans debate if Cassandra counts in the Hidden Blade lineage since she never unsheathes one. But the game positions the Spear of Leonidas as an evolutionary ancestor to the Hidden Blade, a symbol of stealth, precision, and secret resistance, just with more supernatural flair and none of the finger amputation traditions. If this sounds like a weird divergence from the usual assassin setup, that's because it is. But it adds a rich mythic layer linking Cassandra's ancient family past directly to the secret orders that will later wield the Hidden Blade. Next, we jump forward to Eivor Varinsdottir, who actually gets a hidden blade but refuses to wear it the way the Hidden Ones expect. Eivor Varinsdottir. Eivor's Hidden Blade story stands out because it's a mix of tradition and bold defiance. Unlike earlier assassins who hid their blades beneath their forearm, Eivor wears hers openly on top, insisting a warrior's weapon should be seen, not hidden. This directly challenges centuries of assassin customs, where secrecy and concealment were everything. The blade wasn't just handed down, it was a gift from Basim and Hytham, agents of the Hidden Ones, who traveled from Middle Eastern to Viking lands recognizing Eivor's strength. It was an invitation to join a much bigger struggle beyond Viking raids or clan politics. Before you write it off as flair, Eivor's choice to reject the traditional blade orientation has real meaning. By her era, the Hidden Blade no longer follows the original finger sacrifice ritual associated with the earliest assassins, so her open display is a deliberate stylistic and cultural choice rather than a sign of that old cost. It reflects Viking culture's open valor over the Brotherhood's usual stealth approach. It's a philosophical rebellion, melding Viking boldness with assassin symbolism, showing identity can evolve without losing core purpose. Her first kills with the blade come naturally as both raider and order hunter. Infiltrating monasteries and hostile outposts across Anglo-Saxon England, the blade fits into both brutal Viking raids and secret stealth assassinations. The Hidden Blade embodies a fusion of raw Viking aggression and the subtle legacy passed down from the Hidden Ones. But here's where it gets complicated. Eivor's blade marks a crossroads of eras. The Hidden Ones are still defining what it means to be assassin. Her open wear signals a loosening of strict rules, pairing ancient tradition with emerging cultural identities. The blade isn't just practical, it visually represents the tension between old Brotherhood orthodoxy and Viking resilience. In fan circles, Eivor's blade sparks debate. Some love the twist on stealth, others think a concealed blade is the only true way. Yet it fits perfectly with her character as a fierce, unapologetic warrior rewriting ancient rules. Her blade completes the arc, from hidden, sacrificial tools to a weapon worn with Viking pride and assassin purpose. And that's where the story ends. A blade that's both symbol and tool, bridging cultures and centuries, ready for the battles ahead. Assassin's Creed has 15 main protagonists, and almost every single one of them died alone, forgotten, or betrayed. Heart attacks, home invasions, patricide, 2,400 years of immortal loneliness, and deaths that Ubisoft refuses to even confirm happened. That's why today I'm breaking down exactly what happened to every single protagonist after their game ended, starting with the assassin who lived the longest. Altair's Library. Altair lived to 92 years old and died exactly the way he wanted. And 3 centuries later, Ezio Auditore found his skeleton still sitting in the exact position he died in. After killing Al-Mualim in 1191, Altair became mentor of the Levantine Brotherhood and spent decades expanding assassin influence across the Old World. Source: he revolutionized the Brotherhood with technology derived from the Apple of Eden, including the hidden gun and poison blade. In 1227, his rival Abbas Sophian staged a brutal coup while Altair fought Genghis Khan's forces, murdering his younger son Seth and killing his wife Maria Thorpe during the confrontation. Altair spent 20 years in exile before returning at age 82 to reclaim leadership and kill Abbas. But then Revelation shows you what happened next. On August 12, 1257, Altair walked into the library he built beneath Masyaf Fortress carrying the Apple of Eden. He was 92 years old. He recorded his final memories into codex pages, sat down in his chair facing the vault door, and activated a mechanism that sealed the library permanently. The doors locked. The entrance collapsed. Nobody could get in. Nobody could get out. Nuz Altair died alone with the apple exactly as planned. Here's what makes this impossible to process. When Ezio opens that library in 1511, Altair's body is perfectly preserved, not decayed, not disturbed, still seated in the meditation position. The apple rests in his lap exactly where he placed it 254 years earlier. The library's atmosphere somehow prevented decomposition. The codex pages detail Altair's final thoughts, his regret over Maria's death, his hope that future assassins would learn from his mistakes, and his acceptance that all things must end. Ezio takes the apple, leaves Altair's body undisturbed, and seals the library again. Altair remains there, forever. This is the only protagonist's death that was completely intentional, calculated, and peaceful. Altair chose the exact moment, the exact location, and the exact circumstances. He lived longer than any other assassin in franchise history, and died on his own terms with his greatest weapon secured for future generations. But if dying peacefully at 92, after a legendary career seems like the best ending, wait until you see what happened to the assassin who survived 3 entire games only to die on a park bench, Ezio's heart attack. Ezio Auditore survived 4 decades of combat across 3 games and died from heart failure while sitting on a bench. And the worst part is, a mysterious stranger with a facial scar appeared right before it happened. After Revelations, Ezio retired to a villa in the Tuscan countryside with his wife Sofia Sartor and their 2 children Flavia and Marcello. The animated short film Assassin's Creed Embers shows his final days mentoring Chinese assassin Xiao Jun, whose brotherhood had been destroyed by the Templars. Ezio was 65 years old, living peacefully, finally free from the endless war. On November 30th, 1524, he took his family to Florence for a market trip. They sat on a bench in the Piazza della Signoria, watching the crowd, enjoying a simple afternoon together. But then a young man with a scar across his face sits down next to him. The stranger doesn't introduce himself, doesn't explain who he is or why he's there. He simply tells Ezio to get some rest, then stands and walks away into the crowd. Ezio watches him leave, confused. Sofia and Flavia return from shopping. Ezio looks at them smiling, reaches towards Sofia's hand, and dies. No struggle, no warning. Just a sudden heart attack at 3 p.m. in a public square. Here's what nobody can explain. That bench was in the exact same plaza where Giovanni Auditore and Ezio's 2 brothers were hanged in 1476. Ezio returned to the location of his family's execution for his final moment alive. The game never addresses whether this was intentional or coincidence. The mysterious scarred man is never identified in any Assassin's Creed media, novels, comics, or developer interviews. Community theories range from him being a Templar agent who poisoned Ezio, to a time-traveling sage, to a symbolic representation of death itself. Sofia's reaction in Embers is devastating. She realizes he's gone, pulls Flavia close, and sits there holding her dead husband's hand while market crowds pass by. No grand funeral, no brotherhood ceremony. Just a widow on a bench in Florence. The franchise's most beloved protagonist died the most ordinary death imaginable. Heart failure, age 65, surrounded by strangers. But if Ezio's peaceful death seems tragic, wait until you learn what happened to the protagonist, who literally sacrificed himself to save the world and then had his body harvested by Abstergo. Desmond's sacrifice. Desmond Miles died at 25 years old to save the world from a solar flare, and 12 years later, Ubisoft revealed his consciousness is still alive, trapped in an ISU computer simulation. On December 21st, 2012, at 12:07 a.m., Desmond stood in the Grand Temple beneath New York, facing an impossible choice. Juno offered him survival as a messianic figure whose teachings would corrupt humanity. Minerva showed him the alternative. Activate the eye, stop the solar flare, either release Juno, and die instantly. Desmond told his father, Sean and Rebecca, to run, placed his hand on the glowing sphere, and died from spontaneous burn trauma. His right arm was completely incinerated. The rest of his body remained pristine. Abstergo recovered him hours later and performed an autopsy. But then Valhalla revealed what actually happened to his consciousness. Desmond's mind didn't die. It was transported into the Gray, an ISU simulation outside normal space-time where uploaded consciousnesses exist as data. Desmond became the Reader, a being of pure light who forgot his original identity and spent years helping the Isu calculate solutions to prevent Earth's destruction. When Layla Hassan enters the Grey in Valhalla's ending, the reader suddenly remembers he was Desmond Miles. They reunite. They search infinite timelines together, looking for a permanent solution. Desmond is technically alive, but can never return to physical form. Here's what makes this even darker. Abstergo didn't just autopsy Desmond's body, they harvested his DNA and created Sample 17, using his genetic material in Abstergo Entertainment's Animus products for years. Every time someone in Black Flag, Unity, or Syndicate relives historical memories, they're using Desmond's extracted DNA. His son Elijah, born in 2005 to an unnamed mother, inherited concentrated Isu genes and Sage DNA, making him one of the most genetically valuable people on Earth. He helped kill Juno in the Uprising comics, then disappeared into the Australian outback with the Koh-i-Noor diamond. The franchise spent 5 games building Desmond as the Chosen One. Indy killed him to stop the apocalypse, then revealed his sacrifice didn't even work. Juno was released. The solar flare was delayed, not stopped. His body was harvested. His consciousness was trapped in digital purgatory for over a decade before remembering his own name. Desmond saved the world and lost everything, including himself. But if Desmond's sacrifice without resolution seems cruel, wait until you see what happened to the protagonist, who spent his entire life fighting for freedom only to watch his people get sold to land speculators anyway. Connor's abandonment. Connor Kenway fought for American freedom for 6 years and returned home to find his entire village gone. And the worst part is, nobody knows if he actually died alone or if that's just Templar propaganda. After killing Charles Lee in a subdued tavern confrontation in 1783, your Connor traveled back to his Mohawk village, expecting to finally rest. The homestead was thriving. The revolution was won. The Templars were defeated. He walked through the forest to Kanataseton and found nothing. Empty longhouses, abandoned fields, 0 people. The newly formed United States government had sold his tribe's land to settlers to pay off war debts. Everything Connor sacrificed, every battle he fought, every ally he lost, meant absolutely nothing to his people. They were forced to relocate despite his service to the Patriots. But then the game shows you something even worse. Connor attended the British Evacuation Day celebration in New York on November 25, 1783. American flags everywhere, crowds cheering freedom. And right there in the middle of the celebration, he witnesses a slave auction. Black families being sold in chains, while white Americans celebrate liberty. Connor watches in silence, then walks away. The final shot shows him standing alone in the crowd, realizing the freedom he fought for doesn't extend to everyone. The ideals were hollow. An Abstergo document references the sad and lonely death of Rattanaketon, suggesting he died isolated and forgotten around 1804 at age 48. That's the official Templar version. Except the Reflections comics directly contradict this propaganda. Those stories show Connor married a woman from a nearby tribe in the 1780s and fathered 3 children, including daughter Ironhyote. He broke Mohawk tradition by training her as an assassin after discovering her eagle vision, making her the first known female assassin in the Colonial Brotherhood. So which version is true? Did Connor die alone and miserable, or did he find family and purpose training the next generation? Ubisoft has never confirmed either story as definitive canon. His death remains officially unverified in franchise timeline documents. The tragedy isn't just that Connor might have died alone, it's that we'll never know for certain. And the only detailed account comes from the organization he spent his life fighting. But if Connor's ambiguous ending seems frustrating, wait until you learn about the protagonist, whose death is completely confirmed because his own son killed him. Hatham's execution. Hatham Kenway was raised as a Templar by the man who murdered his father, and 56 years later, his own son killed him during the siege of Fort George. Hatham never knew Edward was an assassin. After watching 5 mercenaries storm his London home on December the 3rd, 1735, 10-year-old Hatham killed his first man trying to protect his family. Edward died from a stab wound through the chest. His sister Jennifer was kidnapped and sold to Turkish slavers. Reginald Birch, the Templar Grandmaster who orchestrated the entire attack, posed as a grieving family friend and mentor. He manipulated the traumatized boy into the Templar Order, trained him for decades, and turned him into the Grand Master of the colonial rite. Hatham spent his entire life serving the people who murdered his father. But then, AC3 forces you to play as him for the first 3 sequences. You experience Hatham's perspective, his charisma, his conviction, his genuine belief that Templar Order will save humanity from chaos. In 1755, He meets Mohawk woman Kanyedi Didio while searching for a precursor site and falls in love. She bears his son Connor but never tells him. Haytham continues his Templar work, systematically dismantling the colonial assassins with Shay Cormac throughout Rogue. When he finally meets his adult son in AC3, Connor has already joined the assassins. They work together briefly, they argue constantly, neither will abandon their ideology. On September 16, 1781, Connor cornered Haytham at Fort George during the siege. They fight. Haytham is 55 years old, exhausted, and knows he's going to die. His final words are devastating. Don't think I have any intention of caressing your cheek and saying I was wrong. I will not weep and wonder what might have been. Still, I'm proud of you in a way. You've shown great conviction, strength, courage. All noble qualities. I should have killed you long ago. Connor's response is simple. Goodbye, father. Then he stabs him. Years later, Connor inscribes Sakatatari Watan beneath Haytham's portrait in the homestead basement. It means I made a mistake in Mohawk. The regret never faded. Haytham Kenway lived his entire life serving the men who destroyed his family, died fighting his own son, and never learned the truth about his father's allegiance. But if Haytham dying by Connor's blade seems tragic, wait until you see what happened to the legendary pirate who survived the entire golden age of piracy only to get stabbed by common thugs in his own home. Edward's murder. Edward Kenway survived hundreds of naval battles across the Caribbean and died at 42 from hired thugs in his London parlor. And the attack happened the night before his son's 10th birthday. After Black Flag's ending, Edward retired from piracy and returned to England with Jackdaw's fortune. He married Tessa Stevenson Oakley in 1725, fathered Haytham, and rose to co-leader of the British Assassin Brotherhood. The game's final cutscene shows him at the London Theatre with his young family, watching a performance. But he's distracted. Ghostly visions of Blackbeard, Mary Red, Anne Bonny, and other dead pirates appear in the empty seats around him. The camera lingers on Edward's haunted expression. He survived when they didn't, and the guilt never left. But then December 3rd, 1735 happened. Reginald Birch, Grand Master of the British Templars, orchestrated a home invasion targeting Edward's research journal documenting first civilization sites. 5 mercenaries broke into the Kenway Manor while the family slept. Edward woke to the sound of breaking glass, grabbed his sword, and killed the first attacker in the hallway. The others surrounded him in the parlor. 10-year-old Haytham heard the fighting and ran downstairs. Edward was holding off 3 men simultaneously when one of them got through his guard and drove a blade through his chest. Haytham picked up a fallen sword and killed his first man that night. Edward died on his own floor, bleeding out while his son stood over him in shock. The mercenaries ransacked the study, found the journal, and fled. Jennifer was grabbed during the chaos and sold to Turkish slavers. Tessa survived, but the trauma destroyed her. Birch arrived hours later pretending to be a concerned friend. He's beginning the manipulation that would turn Haytham into a Templar. Here's the cruelest irony. Edward Kenway, legendary pirate captain who commanded the Jackdaw through naval warfare against Spanish man-o'-wars and British frigates, who assassinated governors and Templar Grand Masters, who found the observatory and unlocked its secrets, died fighting common hired thugs. Not in a climactic showdown, not in a grand naval battle, just 5 mercenaries in his house at night. The man who conquered the Caribbean was killed in his pajamas defending his family from burglars. But if Edward's mundane death seems unfair, wait until you learn what happened to his former quartermaster who hesitated to fight the wrong person and got killed for it. Adewale's hesitation. Adewale served as Edward Kenway's quartermaster for years and became a legendary assassin liberating slaves across the Caribbean. And in 1758, he hesitated to fight Haytham Kenway because he was Edward's son, and that mercy got him killed. After leaving Edward's crew, Adewale joined the Assassin Brotherhood and dedicated his life to ending slavery. The Freedom Cry DLC shows him in 1735 Port-au-Prince, liberating hundreds of enslaved people and dismantling the plantation system. Adewale is defending the fortress alongside the assassins when Shay and Haytham breach the walls. The 3 of them end up in close combat. Adewale recognizes Haytham immediately as Edward's son and freezes. Not out of fear, out of loyalty to his dead captain and friend. He can't bring himself to strike at Edward Kenway's child. That hesitation was fatal. And now while Adewale focused on not hurting Haytham, Shay Cormac drove a blade through his back. Adewale fell, bleeding out on the fortress stones. His final words acknowledged how far Shay had fallen from the assassin path. You have forsaken everything we stood for. The tragedy is layered. Adewale spent decades fighting for freedom and died during a battle where the Templars were actively supporting colonial oppression. He survived the golden age of piracy, Edward's death, and 40 years of assassin work, only to be killed by a former brother who defected. And the reason he lost? He couldn't bring himself to harm the son of the man who gave him purpose. Loyalty to Edward Kenway cost Adewale his life 23 years after Edward's death. But if Adewale's death by a former ally seems cruel, then wait until you learn about that former ally whose fate remains completely unknown, because Ubisoft never confirmed what happened to him. Shay's disappearance. Shay Patrick Cormac killed more assassins than any other Templar in colonial history, and after 60 years of loyal service, his death is completely unrecorded. But then Rogue's epilogue jumps forward to 1776 Versailles. Shay is now 45 years old, walking through the Palace of Versailles during a party. He approaches Charles Dorian, an assassin carrying a mysterious box, and stabs him in the back. 8-year-old Arno Dorian watches his father die. This moment directly connects to Unity's opening sequence, making Shay responsible for orphaning the next game's protagonist. Shay's final monologue plays over the scene. I am an older man now, and perhaps wiser. Shang, a war and a revolution have ended, and another is about to begin. That's the last confirmed sighting of Shay Patrick Cormac in any Assassin's Creed media. No death scene, no grave, no database entry confirming his fate. Developers stated he remained loyal to the Templar Order until death, but they never specified when or how that death occurred. His grandson Cudgel Cormac became a prominent assassin hunter in 19th century New York, proving Shay survived at least into the early 1800s. But no novel, comic, or game has ever addressed his final years. The cruel irony. Shay's descendant Javier Mondragon is a modern assassin. The man who dedicated his life to destroying the Brotherhood has a bloodline that eventually rejoined it. Shay Patrick Cormac is the only major protagonist whose death Ubisoft refuses to address. He could have died peacefully at 90. He could have been assassinated in revenge. We'll never know. But if Shay's complete disappearance from the record seems suspicious, wait until you learn about the protagonist he orphaned, who never discovered the truth about his father's killer. Arno's unknown fate. Arno Victor Dorian never learned Shay Cormac killed his father, and after everything he sacrificed, Ubisoft never confirmed when he died, who he married, or if he ever found peace. Arno watched his father Charles get assassinated at Versailles in 1776 when he was 8 years old. He was raised by Templar Grandmaster François de la Serre alongside his daughter Elise, falling in love with her over the years. But then Elise ignored every warning Arno gave her. Germain wielded the Sword of Eden during their fight. Arno told Elise to wait for an opening. She charged anyway. The sword exploded from Germain, channeling too much power. Elise was caught in the blast and died in Arno's arms. The only woman he ever loved, dead because she wouldn't listen. Germain died seconds later. Arno was left holding her body in the ruins, having accomplished nothing. And then the franchise never mentions him again. Zero information about what happened next. No death date, no wife, no children documented in any database, novel, or comic. The only confirmation that Arno had descendants comes from the 2016 Assassin's Creed film, where Callum Lynch is revealed as his direct ancestor. That means Arno definitely had children, but Ubisoft has never identified who the mother was or when this happened. Here's what makes this cruel. Arno lost his father at 8, lost his adoptive father at 21, lost Elise at 26, and spent the rest of his unspecified lifespan completely undocumented. The franchise that obsessively catalogs every detail about Ezio's retirement refuses to tell us anything about whether Arno ever found happiness. But if Arno's blank ending seems incomplete, wait until you see what happened to the twin protagonists who had to hunt down their own corrupted apprentice 20 years after winning London. The Fry twins' torment. Jacob and Evie Fry liberated Victorian London from Templar control and were knighted by Queen Victoria. And 20 years later, Jacob's own apprentice became Jack the Ripper and tortured him for weeks. After defeating Crawford Starrick in 1868, the twins' paths diverged. Evie married Henry Green and moved to India to expand the Brotherhood there. Jacob remained in London as leader of the British assassins and the Rooks gang, training new recruits and maintaining control over the criminal underworld. By all accounts, they'd won. London was free. The Templars were scattered. The twins were celebrated as heroes. For 2 decades, everything seemed fine. But then the Jack the Ripper DLC reveals what actually happened in 1888. Jack the Ripper wasn't some random serial killer. He was one of Jacob's assassin apprentices, a troubled orphan named Jack, who Jacob had personally trained at Lambeth Asylum. Jacob saw potential in the boy and taught him everything: stealth, combat, fear tactics, brutality. Jack became mentally disturbed, twisted Jacob's lessons into a philosophy of terror, and went rogue. He murdered 5 prostitutes in Whitechapel, not for random violence, but as part of a calculated plan to usurp Jacob as Brotherhood leader by proving superior through fear. Jacob tried to stop him. Jack captured him instead. For weeks, Jacob was held prisoner in an underground chamber beneath Lambeth Asylum and systematically tortured. Jack didn't want him dead, he wanted him broken. The DLC shows Jacob chained to a chair, emaciated, brutalized, missing his left eye from Jack's interrogation. The legendary assassin who conquered London was reduced to a traumatized prisoner in his own city by someone he'd trusted. Evie returned from India when she learned Jacob disappeared. She spent the entire DLC hunting Jack's lieutenants, uncovering the conspiracy, and finally tracking Jack to the asylum. She killed him in a brutal rooftop confrontation. When she found Jacob in the underground chamber, he was barely alive. 20 years after their greatest triumph, the Fry twins' legacy was a corrupted apprentice who terrorized London and nearly destroyed them both. And here's the worst part. Ubisoft never confirmed what happened to either twin after 1888. By World War I in 1914, they were approximately 67 years old and were evacuated to the English countryside by Jacob's granddaughter Lydia Fry. No death dates, no final missions, no closure. But if the Fry twins' ambiguous ending seems frustrating, wait until you learn about the protagonist whose fate is confirmed but whose legacy was deliberately erased from history, Bayek's erasure. Bayek of Siwa co-founded the Assassin Brotherhood and was intentionally erased from its history. And the cruelest irony is, he's buried in the same tomb as Aya despite spending decades permanently separated from her. After their son Kemu was murdered by the Order of the Ancients in 49 BCE, Bayek and Aya dismantled the organization responsible and established the Hidden Ones in 47 BCE, creating the foundation that would eventually become the Assassin Brotherhood. But they both agreed they could never return to their former lives together. The grief was too great. The mission was too important. Bayek remained in Egypt to build the Brotherhood there. Aya traveled to Rome, took the name Amunet, and expanded operations across the Mediterranean. They saw each other only once more. But then the Hidden Ones DLC shows that reunion in 38 BCE. Bayek was investigating Order of the Ancients activity in Sinai when Romans captured and crucified him. He hung on the cross for hours, dying slowly in the desert heat. Aya arrived at the last possible moment, cut him down, and saved his life. They spoke briefly. Both acknowledged their love never faded, but their paths had diverged permanently. She left. That was the last time they ever saw each other alive. 9 years later, Bayek's final canonical adventure occurs in the Curse of the Pharaohs DLC, where he confronts supernatural pharaohs resurrected by a piece of Eden in 34 BCE. His death date remains completely unknown, but his mummified remains were discovered by Layla Hassan in October 2017, buried in the same tomb as Aya despite their decades-long separation. Nobody knows how this happened or who arranged it. The database entries don't explain. The games don't address it. 2 people who spent the last 40 years of their lives apart were reunited in death. Bayek faded into complete obscurity. No statues, no cenotaphs, no mentions in assassin lore beyond vague references to founders. In Valhalla, his voice appears only through a single letter to the mysterious merchant child Retta. The intentional erasure is acknowledged in-game. Bayek disappeared from history, as all assassins should. The man who created the creed, established the tenets, and built the foundation for millennia of assassins was deliberately forgotten while his wife became immortalized. Aya's legend. Aya of Alexandria became one of the 7 most legendary assassins in history and was honored with a statue in Monteriggioni's sanctuary. And despite that immortal legacy, nobody knows when or how she actually died. After separating from Bayek in 47 BCE, Aya took the name Amunet and traveled to Rome to expand the Hidden One's influence. She became embedded in Roman politics, befriended Cleopatra, and in 44 BCE assassinated Julius Caesar alongside Brutus during the Ides of March. Her hidden blade pierced his chest in the theater of Pompey while dozens of senators watched. This single act changed the course of human history and cemented her reputation as the Brotherhood's most politically significant operative. But then Assassin's Creed 2 told us she killed Cleopatra with an asp in 30 BCE. Ezio finds Amunet's statue in the sanctuary beneath Monteriggioni Villa. The plaque reads, Amunet, who killed Cleopatra with an asp. For 15 years, this was established canon. The community accepted it, and the wikis documented it. Except when Origins released in 2017, the developers retconned the entire event. The Origins comics reveal Amunet didn't kill Cleopatra. She provided Cleopatra with poison so the Egyptian queen could take her own life and avoid capture by Octavian. Amunet enabled the suicide but didn't perform an execution. Here's what makes this contradiction worse. Ezio also finds Amunet's cenotaph in Venice during AC2, a memorial tomb honoring her achievements. Except it's not her actual burial place. That tomb is in Egypt, where Layla Hassan discovered her mummified remains buried alongside Bayek in 2017. The Venice cenotaph was symbolic. The Monteriggioni statue was commemorative, but neither location contains actual details about when Amunet died, how she died, or what she did in the 40-plus years between Caesar's assassination and her burial. The database entries focus entirely on her legendary kills. Caesar in 44 BCE, enabling Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE. After that, nothing. No missions, no mentions, no final years documented anywhere in games, novels, or comics. She lived at minimum into her 50s, possibly her 60s or 70s, but Ubisoft has never confirmed specifics. The woman who shaped Roman history and became immortalized in assassin lore spent decades doing something important enough to earn a statue, yet those decades remain completely undocumented. Her legend eclipsed her actual life. But here's what's truly impossible to ignore. These aren't isolated mysteries. Every single one of these 15 protagonists connects to something bigger, something that reveals the franchise's hidden pattern about what it actually means to be an assassin. Cassandra's immortality. Cassandra lived for 2,400 years, watching everyone she ever loved die. And when she finally had the chance to pass on her immortality in 2018, she chose death immediately. Born around 458 BCE to Marine and the Isu-blooded Pythagoras, Cassandra inherited demigod abilities, making her a tainted one, with impossible strength and resilience. After dismantling the cult of Cosmos and sealing Atlantis, she watched her father die and inherited the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, granting biological immortality. She couldn't age, she couldn't die. The staff wouldn't let her. The legacy of the First Blade DLC forced her to make an impossible choice. Her infant son Elpidios was targeted by the Order of the Ancients, so she gave him to his grandfather Darius and sent them to Egypt for safety. She never saw her son again, but then she had to keep living for another 2,400 years. Cassandra spent millennia hunting dangerous Isu artifacts across the world, watching civilizations rise and collapse, witnessing humanity repeat the same mistakes endlessly. In October 2018, Cassandra finally found Layla Hassan at the gateway to Atlantis. She was wearing what Layla described as a trendy tuxedo. The staff had transformed into different shapes over the centuries to blend into each era. Cassandra delivered a warning that shattered everything. Neither assassins nor Templars could ever fully defeat the other without destroying the world. The conflict was eternal. The balance was necessary. So every victory by one side created the conditions for the other's resurgence. The franchise's longest-lived protagonist chose death the instant she was allowed to die. But if living for 24 centuries seems like the worst fate, wait until you learn about the protagonist who was offered immortality and godlike power, and rejected it completely, only to die alone anyway. Assassin's Creed has 15 main protagonists spanning over a decade of games, and almost none of them are remembered the way they deserve. Some are overrated, some are criminally underrated. Today I'm ranking every single one, starting with the guy who started it all, Altair ibn Lahad. Here's the thing about Altair, he's the face of the entire franchise, the original assassin, and most people never actually finished his game. Assassin's Creed 1 was mechanically rough, repetitive missions, stiff combat, the same investigation loop 9 times in a row. A lot of players bounced off it hard, so Altair's reputation is built more on legacy than on lived experience. But if you follow his full arc, from the arrogant assassin who gets demoted in AC1 all the way through Revelations, where he's an old man locking himself in a library to die alone with the Apple of Eden, his story is genuinely one of the best in the series. The problem is that arc is split across 2 games, separated by 4 years. And if you only played the first one, you got the worst version of him. But at least Altair had the excuse of being first. The next protagonist didn't just improve on him, he made everyone forget Altair existed. Alexios/Cassandra. Assassin's Creed Odyssey did something no mainline entry had ever done before. It let you pick your protagonist. Alexios or Cassandra, brother or sister, same bloodline, same Peloponnesian War, completely different experience depending on who you chose. Here's the thing, Ubisoft marketed both equally, let players decide on day one, and then quietly confirmed that Cassandra is the canonical protagonist. That's right, if you played 80 hours as Alexios, fought the cult of Cosmos, sailed across ancient Greece, and felt like the true hero of the story, Ubisoft essentially said, cool, but actually it was Cassandra the whole time. The community had opinions about this. A lot of players picked Alexios, and Ubisoft's own data showed he was the more popular choice. But Cassandra's voice performance by Melisanthi Mahout is consistently praised as the stronger of the two, with fans arguing she brings more nuance and emotional range than Michael Antonikos' Alexios. It became one of those debates that never really ended, and beyond the protagonist split, Odyssey itself was a lightning rod. The game sold incredibly well and introduced full dialogue choices, romance options, and literal mythological creatures into the formula. Some fans loved the RPG evolution, others said it stopped feeling like Assassin's Creed entirely. No hidden blade, no brotherhood, just a massive Greek sandbox wearing the franchise's name. Whether that's a compliment or an insult depends entirely on what you think Assassin's Creed is supposed to be. But speaking of identity crises, let's talk about the protagonist who had to carry the weight of an entire Viking saga on their shoulders, Shay Cormac. On paper, Shay Cormac is the most interesting protagonist in the entire franchise. He's the only one who looks at the Assassin Brotherhood, decides they're wrong, and defects to the Templars. Not because he's corrupted, not because he's power-hungry, because he genuinely believes the Assassins are reckless and dangerous. And honestly, the game makes a solid case for it. Shay watches the Assassins trigger a catastrophic earthquake that kills thousands of innocent people, and when he raises concerns, they basically tell him to shut up and follow orders. So he doesn't. He walks away, joins the enemy, and starts hunting down his former brothers one by one. That's a genuinely compelling premise for a story, but here's the problem. Almost nobody played it. Rogue launched in November 2014, the exact same day as Assassin's Creed Unity. And while Unity got all the marketing, all the hype, and all the next-gen attention, Rogue was quietly released on last-gen consoles like an afterthought. It reviewed decently. Fans who actually played it loved the narrative inversion, but the cultural footprint just wasn't there. Shay's motivation is one of the most ideologically rich in the series, yet most of the community barely knows his name. He's the definition of a great concept buried by terrible timing. But if you think bad timing hurt Shay, wait until you see what it did to the next protagonist on this list, Arno Dorian. Arno Dorian might be the unluckiest protagonist in gaming history, not because of his story, because of his launch. Here's the thing about Arno. His actual character arc is solid. A young man raised by a Templar, driven by guilt and revenge after his adoptive father's murder, falling in love with the enemy's daughter during the French Revolution. On paper, that's a compelling setup. And Dan Jeanot's performance capture work gives Arno genuine emotional weight in the quieter moments. But nobody cared, because when Unity launched in 2014, the game was borderline unplayable. We're talking single-digit frame rates in crowded areas, characters falling through the world, and the now legendary missing face bug where NPCs walked around with floating eyeballs and exposed teeth. Unity became a meme before most players even got to experience Arno's story, and that raises a question nobody wants to answer honestly. Is it fair to rank a character based on the broken product they shipped in? Arno didn't write the buggy code. His revenge narrative might lean generic, sure, and the love story with Elise doesn't reinvent the wheel. Some critics have actually defended Unity's story as underrated once you strip away the technical disaster. But the damage was done. Community rankings consistently place Arno near the bottom, and his reputation never fully recovered. Even after patches fixed most of the problems, Arno is a cautionary tale. Not of bad writing, but of bad timing. But if you think a rough launch is the worst thing that can happen to a protagonist, wait until you meet the Fry twins. Connor Kenway. Connor is the most misunderstood protagonist in this entire franchise. The community called him boring, stiff, a downgrade from Ezio, and honestly, they were wrong. Here's the thing about Connor. His story isn't designed to make you laugh or charm you. It's designed to make you uncomfortable. He's a half-Mohawk man fighting in the American Revolution, a war that supposedly represents freedom, while his own people are being systematically erased by both sides. Every alliance he makes is temporary. Every victory he earns costs him something. The revolution he bleeds bleeds for doesn't include him. And then there's Haytham Kenway, Connor's father, a Templar. Their relationship is one of the best narrative threads in the entire series. It's not a simple hero versus villain dynamic. Haytham genuinely believes he's right. Connor genuinely believes he's right. And watching them clash isn't satisfying, it's heartbreaking, because you can see the version of reality where they could have been allies. The American Revolution setting gave Assassin's Creed 3 a massive historical playground, but it also boxed Connor into a story where there are no real winners. That's not a weakness, that's the point. Connor doesn't get a happy ending because his people didn't get one either. He's not boring, he's devastated. There's a difference. But if Connor's story is a tragedy dressed as a revolution, the next protagonist is a party dressed as a pirate game. Eivor Varinsdottir. Eivor is a genuinely great character trapped inside a genuinely exhausting game, and that distinction matters. In Valhalla, you play as a Norse Viking leading raids into 9th century England, building a settlement, forging alliances, and slowly carving out a kingdom. The character is voiced by Magnus Brun as male Eivor and Cecilia Stenspill as female Eivor, and both performances are excellent. Here's the thing though. Canonically, Eivor is female. Ubisoft confirmed this. The game handles the dual gender option through an animus explanation, where letting the animus choose defaults to female Eivor as the canonical version. So if you played the entire game as male Eivor, you technically played the non-canon version. Surprise. Now Eivor herself gets solid praise from the community. She's charismatic, surprisingly funny, and carries real emotional weight in her quieter moments. The problem was never the character. The problem is that Valhalla asks you to spend over 100 hours with her, and the game around her is bloated beyond reason. Repetitive arcs, padded regions, and a main story that just refuses to end. But commercially, Valhalla was a monster. It became one of the best-selling entries in the entire franchise, proving that people wanted to be a Viking even if they got tired halfway through. Eivor deserved a tighter game, but the fact that people still speak highly of her, despite Valhalla's length, says everything about how strong that character actually is. Speaking of characters, let's talk about someone the community is far less kind to. Aveline de Grandpré. Here's a character most of you have never played as, and that's not your fault. Aveline de Grandpré is the first female protagonist in Assassin's Creed history, and Ubisoft buried her on the PS Vita. That's right, a black, French-Haitian woman leading a AAA-adjacent Assassin's Creed game in 2012, set in colonial Louisiana during the height of the slave trade, and they put her on a handheld that most people forgot existed within a year. Let me be clear, Aveline is genuinely one of the most interesting protagonists in this entire franchise. Assassin's Creed 3. Liberation gave her a persona system where she could switch between 3 distinct disguises: the assassin, the lady, and the slave. Each persona changed how NPCs reacted to her, what areas she could access, and what combat options were available. It wasn't just a gimmick, it was a social stealth mechanic built directly into the reality of being a woman of mixed race in 18th century New Orleans. The game was literally using gameplay to comment on class, race, and gender in colonial America. But nobody played it. The Vita's install base was tiny, and by the time Liberation got an HD remaster on consoles, the moment had passed. The franchise had already moved on to Edward Kenway and the Open Seas. Aveline got left behind, not because she wasn't compelling, but because the platform she launched on was already dying. It's one of the franchise's biggest missed opportunities. But speaking of missed opportunities, let's talk about a protagonist who had every advantage and still divided the fanbase right down the middle: Bayek of Siwa. Now we need to talk about the man who started it all. Not Altair, not Ezio. Bayek of Siwa is the literal founder of the Hidden Ones, the organization that would eventually become the Assassin Brotherhood. Every hood, every hidden blade, every creed spoken in a shadowy room traces back to this one Egyptian Medjay. And the reason he built it? Grief. Bayek's son Kemu was murdered. That's the engine driving everything in Assassin's Creed Origins. Not politics, not ideology, not some grand philosophical war between order and freedom. A father lost his child, and he tore ancient Egypt apart looking for the people responsible. It's one of the rawest, most personal stories the franchise has ever told, and it hits different because Bayek isn't brooding or distant about it. He's warm. He loves people. He plays with children. In the villages he visits, he laughs. He protects strangers. And then you remember why he's doing all of this, and it guts you. Here's the thing. Origins wasn't just another sequel. It was a make-or-break moment for the entire franchise. The series had gone stale, and Ubisoft knew it. They took a full extra year of development, completely rebuilt the gameplay into an RPG system, and bet everything on Bayek carrying the emotional weight of a total reinvention. He did. The RPG pivot worked because it had a soul at the center of it, and that soul was a grieving father in 49 BCE Egypt building something that would outlast empires. But if Bayek represents the franchise's emotional peak, the next entry represents its most controversial experiment with the modern-day storyline. headline: Evie Fry. Here's something that almost never happens in gaming. Jacob Fry got the marketing, he got the box art, he got the trailers, and then the community collectively decided his sister was the better protagonist. Evie Fry is the co-lead of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, set in 1868 Victorian London, and she represents something the franchise desperately needed after Unity's catastrophic launch: competence. Syndicate didn't reinvent the wheel, it just made sure the wheel actually worked this time, and Evie was a huge part of why. The twin system in Syndicate created a genuine mechanical split. Jacob was the brawler, the guy who punched his way through problems with brass knuckles and reckless energy. Evie was the stealth operative, calculated, precise, patient. Her skill tree leaned heavily into invisibility, stealth takedowns, and tactical planning, and for a franchise literally called Assassin's Creed, the character who actually assassinated people quietly felt like the correct way to play, and that's exactly why the community gravitates toward her. In fan discussions and rankings, Evie consistently gets more love than Jacob. Not because Jacob is bad, but because Evie feels like she belongs in this franchise on a fundamental level. She's methodical where Jacob is chaotic. She's focused where he's impulsive. She's the assassin, he's the street fighter. Syndicate itself lands somewhere in the middle of most franchise rankings. It's not groundbreaking, but it stabilized the ship after Unity nearly sank it. And Evie, she's the quiet reason a lot of people remember that game fondly at all. But if Evie brought the franchise back to its stealth roots, the next protagonist blew the entire foundation wide open. Jacob Fry. And then there's Jacob, the other twin, the one Ubisoft put on the cover, plastered across every trailer, and marketed as the face of Syndicate. And yet ask the community who the better Fry is, and the answer is almost always Evie, every single time. Here's the thing about Jacob: he's a brawler. Brass knuckles, cane swords, kukri knives, fists first, and questions never. His entire approach to the Assassin Brotherhood is punch the problem until it stops being a problem. And honestly, that's either the most entertaining thing in the franchise or the most annoying, depending entirely on your tolerance for a protagonist who treats Victorian London like a bar fight with historical landmarks. Jacob's humor is constant. He cracks jokes during missions, refuses to take anything seriously, and treats the Templar conspiracy like a mild inconvenience. Some players found that charming, a refreshing break from the brooding assassins who came before him. Others found it grating, like playing as the class clown while the world burns around you. But here's where it gets complicated. The Jack the Ripper DLC actually gave Jacob something he never had in the base game: consequences. An older, haunted Jacob, dealing with the fallout of Jack the Ripper's terror campaign across London. It's darker, heavier, and it showed what Jacob could have been if the main game had taken him more seriously. The community's verdict: fun to play, hard to love, and forever living in his sister's shadow. But at least Jacob's problems are his own. The next protagonist on this list has problems that belong to an entire franchise: Adewale. Before Edward Kenway became the pirate everyone remembers, he had a quartermaster, a former slave named Adewale who kept the Jackdaw running, kept Edward alive, and barely got a thank you for any of it. Most players remember him as a supporting character in Black Flag, a loyal right hand, background furniture with good voice acting, but Adewale got his own story, and it's the heaviest thing Assassin's Creed has ever produced. Freedom Cry is a standalone DLC set 15 years after Black Flag, and it drops Adewale into Port-au-Prince during the height of the Atlantic slave trade. This isn't subtext. This isn't metaphor. You are liberating enslaved people from plantations, intercepting slave ships, and fighting overseers. The game forces you to watch auctions. It forces you to hear the screams from below deck. There is zero distance between you and the horror. Here's the thing: no other Assassin's Creed content has ever committed this hard to real human suffering as its central mechanic. Not as a side quest, not as flavor text, as the entire point. Adewale isn't fighting some ancient conspiracy. He's fighting the actual worst thing humans have ever done to each other, and almost nobody played it because it's DLC. It launched as an add-on to Black Flag, and even after it went standalone, most of the community had already moved on. Critics praised Freedom Cry for its ambition and emotional weight, but the player numbers never matched the reception. Adewale became one of the franchise's most respected protagonists among the people who actually experienced his story, and a complete stranger to everyone else. That's the tragedy of Adewale. Not just what he endured in the game, but what happened to his legacy outside of it. A story this important, buried behind a purchase most people never made. But if Adewale's story suffers from being too hidden, the next protagonist has the opposite problem. Everyone knows Alexios, and almost nobody agrees on what to do with him. Basim ibn Ishak. Basim is the franchise's most interesting experiment in years, and I don't think enough people appreciate why. He's the only protagonist in Assassin's Creed history who you meet as a supporting character in one game, then play as the lead in another, and that completely changes how his story works. Let me explain. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Basim shows up as a mysterious hidden one who helps Eivor throughout the campaign. He's charismatic, helpful, and seemingly loyal. But by the end of Valhalla, there's a massive lore reveal about who Basim actually is that recontextualizes literally everything about him. His motivations, his personality, his entire reason for existing in the story. I won't fully spoil it here, but if you know, you know. And if you don't, play Valhalla's ending before touching Mirage because it hits completely different. Then Mirage comes along in 2023 and takes us back to 9th century Baghdad, showing Basim's origin as a street thief who joins the Hidden Ones. This is his coming-of-age story. The game strips away the RPG bloat of Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla and goes back to basics. Stealth-focused gameplay, a condensed map, linear assassination missions, the hidden blade front and center. It's the closest the franchise has felt to the original Assassin's Creed in over a decade, and the community was genuinely split on this. Some players loved it. Mirage felt like a refreshing palate cleanser after 3 massive RPGs that each demanded 100+ hours. Basim's grounded, focused story was exactly what they wanted, but others felt like the Valhalla twist made it hard to fully connect with Basim in Mirage because you already know where his story ends up. You're watching an origin story for a character whose destination you've already seen, and for some people, that removed the tension entirely. Here's the thing though, Basim carries something no other protagonist on this list does. He bridges 2 completely different eras of Assassin's Creed design, the RPG trilogy and the classic formula, in a single character arc. Whether that works for you depends entirely on which game you played first, but if you think Basim's dual identity is complicated, wait until we talk about a protagonist whose entire existence the community still argues about. Now technically, Haytham Kenway isn't a main protagonist, he's a prologue character, an antagonist, the villain of Assassin's Creed 3, but leaving him off this list would be a crime, because what Ubisoft pulled with Haytham is one of the greatest narrative tricks in gaming history. Haytham Kenway. Here's what happened. You boot up Assassin's Creed 3. You play as Haytham Kenway for the first several hours of the game. You do assassin things, you climb buildings, you stab people, you attend secret meetings. Everything about the presentation, the music, the framing, the gameplay tells you this is your hero. This is the assassin you'll be spending the next 40 hours with. And then the game reveals he's a Templar. Not just any Templar, the Grand Master of the Colonial Rite. The entire prologue was a lie. Every mission you completed, every target you eliminated, you were doing it for the enemy, and the game never once winked at you. But here's the kicker. Even after the reveal, even after Connor takes over as the actual protagonist, a massive chunk of the community still thinks Haytham is the more compelling character. He's charismatic, calculated, and genuinely believes he's doing the right thing. He's not evil for the sake of evil. He's a man with conviction, and that makes him terrifying. Haytham proves that sometimes the best protagonist isn't the hero at all. But speaking of characters who blur the line between assassin and Templar, nobody did it quite like the man who actually switched sides. Edward Kenway. Black Flag is the game that made people who didn't care about Assassin's Creed suddenly care about Assassin's Creed, and Edward Kenway is the reason why. Here's the thing about Edward. He's not an assassin. Not at the start. He's a selfish, glory-chasing Welsh pirate who stumbles into the Brotherhood's war because he thinks there's money in it. He doesn't believe in the creed. He doesn't care about Templars or assassins. He wants gold, he wants fame, and he wants to prove everyone who doubted him wrong. That's it. And that's exactly what makes his arc one of the best in the entire franchise. Because over the course of Black Flag, you watch this man lose everything. His friends, his reputation, the people who trusted him. Every selfish decision catches up to him, and the game doesn't let you look away from the consequences. By the time Edward finally commits to the assassin cause, it's not because someone recruited him or gave him a speech. It's because he's got nothing left, and he realizes the only thing worth fighting for is something bigger than himself. Matt Ryan's performance carries every beat of that transformation. The charm, the arrogance, the quiet devastation when it all falls apart. Edward feels like a real person in a way that very few video game protagonists manage. Black Flag consistently ranks among the highest rated entries in the series, and Edward sits comfortably as one of the 2 most beloved protagonists the franchise has ever produced. He took a series that was starting to feel formulaic and blew the doors wide open with Caribbean sunshine, naval combat, and a character arc that actually earns its emotional payoff. But there's one protagonist who ranks above him, and if you've been paying attention, you already know exactly who it is. Ezio Auditore. Look, you already knew. Everybody knew. Yeah, putting Ezio anywhere other than number 1 would be dishonest, and I'm not going to pretend this was a close call. But here's the thing. The reason Ezio sits at the top isn't just nostalgia. It's because no other protagonist in this entire series got what Ezio got. A complete life. 3 full games. Not DLC, not a cameo. 3 entire titles dedicated to one man's journey. That has never happened before or since in this franchise. Assassin's Creed 2 gives you the angry, heartbroken teenager watching his family get destroyed. Brotherhood gives you the leader, the strategist building something bigger than himself in the shadow of Rome. And Revelations gives you the part nobody expected to hit so hard, the tired version. The old man still fighting, but now asking himself whether any of it was worth it. Roger Craig Smith voiced this character across all 3 games, and you can literally hear the age settle into Ezio's voice between entries. The arrogance fades, the certainty cracks. By Revelations, Ezio isn't chasing vengeance anymore. He's chasing meaning. And then there's Embers. The short film shows Ezio as an old man in Tuscany, retired, quiet, sitting on a bench with his family nearby, and then he just stops. No epic battle, no dramatic last words. Just a man on a bench, closing his eyes. And that's how the greatest assassin in the franchise goes out. It destroyed people, and the reason it worked is because we earned that moment. We spent 3 games watching this man grow from a reckless kid into someone wise enough to let go. Every scar, every loss, every lesson built to that single quiet moment on a bench. Nobody else on this list has that. Edward comes close, Bayek comes close, but nobody got the full arc, birth to death, revenge to peace. Ezio Auditore isn't just the best Assassin's Creed protagonist, he's the reason most of us fell in love with this franchise in the first place. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.